I used to wake with a heaviness in my chest before my feet ever touched the floor. There were mornings when I knew, even before the first sound of the street, that another demand was waiting for me. Another envelope, another figure, another reminder from the world of Caesar telling me what I owed, what was due, what had not yet been paid. And I tell you this plainly, not to dramatize it, but because I want you to know that I am not speaking to you from theory tonight. I know what it is to feel pressed by money. I know what it is to feel that numbers can seem larger than your hope if you do not know the law of your own being. There was a time when the sound of the post arriving stirred in me not curiosity, but dread. I had not yet understood that man does not live at the mercy of appearances, but by the assumptions he consents to as true. So I looked upon letters as power, bills as authority, and circumstance as final. I would rise and meet the day already inwardly defeated, and then wonder why the day reflected that mood back to me. I thought, as most men think, that the outer world was the cause and my feeling was the effect. I had not yet discovered that feeling is the cause, and the world only the delayed echo. If you are listening now with tired eyes, or with your body already growing still, if you are carrying some quiet pressure about money, about obligations, about tomorrow, then listen gently and do not strain. You need not force anything tonight. You need only hear me. I am speaking to that deeper part of you that remains awake even as the body falls asleep. And it is to that deeper part that the truth must be spoken, for it is that part of man that creates. I remember one night in particular, and I can still feel the atmosphere of it. I was not sitting in some grand state of spiritual triumph. I was not performing a ritual. I was not reciting affirmations. I was not trying to make anything happen. In fact, I had grown tired of trying. The room was quiet. My body was heavy. My thoughts, which had troubled me through the day, were beginning to loosen their grip as I drifted towards sleep. It was that delicate interval, that soft borderland where one is not fully awake and not yet gone into dream. The senses were dimming. The mind that argues was fading. I was simply there, suspended in that sacred stillness. And then it happened. I heard 7 words, not with the outer ear, as you hear the ticking of a clock, or the sound of footsteps in a hall, but inwardly, with a clarity more real than physical sound. They did not come as something I was inventing. They came as revelation. They arrived complete, alive, finished. And in the instant I heard them, something in me became still in a way I had never known before. The pressure I had been carrying seemed to lose its authority. The fear that had gripped me so often was, for that moment, absent. I did not reason my way into peace. I entered it. Now I will not give you those 7 words just yet. Not because I wish to withhold them from you, but because if I were to speak them too soon, many would take them as mere language, and miss the mystery entirely. The power was not in syllables as such. The power was in the state in which they were received, and the authority from which they were spoken within me. A man may hear a sentence and remain unchanged. Another may hear the same sentence in the depth of his being and watch his world begin to rearrange itself around that inner acceptance. That night I understood, not intellectually but by direct experience, that money does not move by toil alone, nor by anxious effort, nor by pleading with life as though life were outside of you. Money, like every visible thing, moves in obedience to state. It answers the inner claim. It follows the feeling of reality accepted in consciousness. And when those 7 words entered me, they did not merely comfort me, they repositioned me. They shifted the center from which I was living. I was no longer inwardly standing in debt, in pressure, in fear. I had touched another state, and because I touched another state, the world had to answer. I say had to answer, because this is law, not chance, not luck, not favoritism. Law. The same law by which a seed brings forth after its kind. The same law by which imaginal acts become facts. The same law by which every assumption hardens into circumstance. Men pray and then doubt, affirm and then fear, desire and then contradict their own desire, by the feeling they carry. Then they conclude that the law does not work, but the law is always working. It is working when a man fears, and it is working when a man believes. It is working now as you listen. So tonight, as you let the body grow quiet, and the day begin to fall away from you, I want you to stay with me. Do not listen as one collecting ideas. Listen as one standing near a doorway. For I will show you what those 7 words were. And more importantly, I will show you why they were heard when they were heard, and why, when they are received from the right state of consciousness, money begins to move toward you as though summoned by an unseen command. I will show you the inner act. I will show you the mood. I will show you the law beneath the words. And if you follow me not with strain, but with quiet willingness, you may discover tonight that what you called financial pressure was never your master. It was only the shadow of an old assumption. And shadows vanish, not by fighting them, but by turning toward the light. So let yourself soften now. Let the body rest. Let the mind unclench its grip upon the day. You need not solve anything as you listen. You need not force belief. Simply be here with me in this stillness. For it was in such stillness that I heard them, 7 words, simple words, living words. And once I heard them truly, I could no longer return to the old way of fearing money, for I had found the source from which all supply appears. And before this night is through, I intend to lead you to that same source within yourself. Most men are taught, from childhood, to treat words as if they were only labels fastened onto things that already exist. They are taught to believe that speech is descriptive, that one looks upon the world and then speaks of what is seen. So a man sees lack and says, I am struggling. He sees delay and says, nothing moves for me. He sees debt and says, I am burdened. And because he believes he is merely describing reality, he does not notice that he is, in that very moment, continuing to create it. I tell you from experience, words are not first descriptions. They are first decrees. They are acts of selection. They are the shaping edge of consciousness made audible. The outer world seems so solid, so immediate, so persuasive, that man imagines his speech is only a report about facts. But the facts themselves are only the delayed outpicturing of what he has inwardly consented to as true, and that consent is most often carried in words, spoken or silent, repeated until they become feeling, and felt until they become form. Scripture reveals this mystery so plainly that the mind overlooks it because of its very simplicity. It does not say that God examined darkness, analyzed darkness, and then negotiated with darkness. It says God said, let there be light, and there was light. He did not ask, he declared, he did not plead with circumstance. He spoke from the authority of being. This is not a story to admire from a distance. It is the eternal pattern of creation occurring in you now. Every time you speak from the center of your being, you are doing in miniature what the scripture describes in majesty. The world has persuaded man to use speech as a servant of appearances, when speech was given to reveal his nature as creator. That is why I urge you to listen to yourself, not only when you speak aloud to others, but when you speak inwardly to yourself in the privacy of your own mind. For your inner speech is the truest form of prayer, and your outer life is forever answering it. When I first began to grasp this, I looked back over my life and saw that many conditions I had called fate had been quietly named by me long before they appeared. I had joked in certain seasons about lack, and life answered my jest with discipline. I had inwardly repeated that things were difficult, and then met difficulty around every corner. I had spoken of time as my enemy, and then found myself chased by it. I did not know then that I was planting and then lamenting my own harvest. But the law was no respecter of my ignorance. It simply fulfilled what I sustained. This is why I say to you tonight, every circumstance in your world is in some way a word made visible. Not merely a word uttered once and forgotten, but a word accepted, inhabited, felt, and thus impressed upon consciousness. A phrase you lived in, a definition of self you repeated, a quiet inward conclusion you drew and returned to, until it became natural. I never have enough. It always takes too long. Money leaves as soon as it comes. I am under pressure. These are not harmless observations. These are creative acts, when felt as true. Now hear me carefully, especially if you are listening in that drowsy state where truth enters more deeply. I am not telling you this so that you condemn yourself for every careless phrase you have ever spoken. Condemnation is only another misuse of the word. I am telling you this so you may recover your authorship. The moment you see that words create, you are no longer helpless before circumstances. You may then begin to speak, inwardly and outwardly, from the state you wish to inhabit. The world does not hear your voice as the ear hears sound. The world feels your conviction. That is the secret so few understand. Men think they can trick reality with phrases while inwardly remaining in fear. They say, I am prosperous, and tremble. They say, all is well, and inwardly rehearse catastrophe. They say, I trust, while gripping anxiety like a talisman. Then they wonder why the outer world answers the anxiety rather than the phrase. It is because creation responds to conviction, not vocabulary. A whispered word, spoken from inner certainty, carries more creative force than 1,000 loud declarations, spoken from doubt. The universe, if I may use that expression, does not respond to performance. It responds to state. It responds to the mood in which the word is spoken, the identity from which it is claimed, the feeling tone that saturates it. You may fool men with phrases. You cannot fool consciousness. Consciousness reflects what you are, not what you merely recite. So let us make this simple and unforgettable. Speech is seed. Feeling is soil. Reality is harvest. Take that slowly. Speech is seed. Every word is a planting. Some words are planted carelessly, tossed into consciousness in moments of irritation, fear, complaint, or resignation. Others are planted deliberately, with reverence, with awareness, with inner acceptance, but planted they are. Feeling is soil. The emotional state in which your words are held determines whether the seed takes root. A seed cast on stone does not grow. A seed dropped into living soil and nourished becomes visible life. And reality, the world you meet tomorrow and next month and next year, is harvest. It is the field answering your hidden agriculture. I learned that I could no longer afford, in the deepest spiritual sense, to speak as one hypnotized by appearances. If a bill arrived, I had to refuse the old reflex of naming myself burdened. If delay appeared, I had to refuse the old habit of saying that life was against me. This did not mean I denied what my senses reported. It meant I denied those reports the right to define me. There is a great difference. I could see the appearance, and yet speak from the deeper truth. I could acknowledge the shadow and still plant light. That is what the awakened man does. He does not use words to repeat bondage. He uses words to name freedom until freedom becomes the natural climate of his mind. And here again, we return to the great mystery of I am. These two words are not mere grammar. They are the divine name in action. Before you say what you have, what you fear, what you want, what you think, you first say I am. That is the root. That is the creative center. Whatever you attach to I am with feeling, you invite into embodiment. If you say, I am overwhelmed and feel it, you have planted a seed. If you say, I am provided for and feel it, you have planted another. Both will bear fruit after their kind. This is why I urge such care, not fear, but care, in your use of I am. It is the most sacred current in speech. Men use it casually, and then marvel at the force of the worlds they have created. But once you become aware of it, everything changes. You begin to hear your own inner dialogue differently. You notice how often the old man in you claims limitation. You notice how quickly habit attaches I am to fatigue, lack, delay, or helplessness. And in noticing, you are already beginning to awaken, because what is observed can be revised. There was a period in my own life when I watched this law at work with startling clarity. If I let myself inwardly say, even in passing, this matter is difficult, I would feel the subtle contraction that followed, and then watch the world arrange itself in accordance with that contraction. Doors seemed slower to open. Men became less receptive. The same path felt heavier. But if I caught myself and withdrew that word, and instead claimed inwardly, this is already arranged, I am supported, something changed first in me, and soon after in events. The path lightened. Circumstances softened. Means appeared. What had seemed fixed proved to be fluid. And why? Because the world was not obeying my noise. It was reflecting my conviction. If you understand this, truly understand it, then even now, as you listen, half resting, perhaps with your eyes closed, you can begin to feel the dignity of your own speech. You can begin to sense that every phrase is a brushstroke upon the canvas of your life. You need not become tense about this. Tension only plants more strain. But you can become aware. You can become deliberate. You can begin to speak fewer words and truer ones. Let your words be chosen not by the panic of the moment, but by the state you intend to live in. When fear rises and wants to speak through you, pause, not to suppress, but to remember. Ask inwardly, what seed do I wish to plant now? If the old phrase comes, I cannot manage this, do not feed it. Breathe. Let the body soften. Then speak from the state you choose, I am sustained, I am guided. This is already moving in my favor. At first, the old habit may protest. It may feel unfamiliar. But unfamiliar is not untrue. Often the higher truth feels unfamiliar only because you have practiced the lower one longer. And if you are listening while sleep approaches, this is the perfect hour to begin. For in these tender moments, the mind that argues grows quiet, and the deeper soil of consciousness lies open. What you hear and accept now descends more easily into root. That is why tonight I am not merely giving you ideas. I am trying to shift the ground beneath your words. For if the soil changes, the harvest must change. Let me say this plainly so it enters you deeply. You do not have to wait for reality to change before you change your speech. You change your speech because you understand speech is one of the instruments by which reality changes. You do not speak from evidence. You speak from identity. You do not name yourself after the passing condition. You name the condition after the self you choose to be. This is how God speaks. This is how creation moves. This is how the unseen becomes seen. And once you begin to live this way, you will notice something almost miraculous in its simplicity. The world becomes less frightening because you no longer mistake it for the cause. You begin to see every condition as harvest, not origin. If it is a lovely harvest, bless it and continue. If it is a bitter harvest, do not despair, plant anew. The field is still yours. The soil still receives. The law is still faithful. You are never locked into yesterday's planting, except by continuing to sow the same seed today. That realization alone can bring immense relief. For then even financial pressure loses some of its terror. It may still appear, but it is no longer a final sentence. It becomes information. It tells you what state has been active, and having seen it, you may choose again. You may sow again. You may sue again. You may speak from another center. So as we go deeper tonight, keep this image near you. Speech as seed, feeling as soil, reality as harvest. Let it become a living picture in your mind. If you plant fear and water it with repetition, fear will ripen into form. If you plant freedom and nourish it with feeling, freedom will ripen just as surely. The law does not mock you. It mirrors you. And that is why those 7 words mattered so much when I heard them. They were not merely beautiful. They were seed. And because I received them in that soft, fertile borderland near sleep, and because they entered me with conviction rather than strain, they took root. They did not remain language. They became life. In a little while, I shall show you more clearly how feeling gives power to the spoken word, and why the state in which you hear and speak determines the speed and faithfulness of the harvest. But for now, let this truth settle over you as gently as sleep itself. Your words are not small things. They are creative movements of the I am within you. Speak then as one planting eternity in the field of consciousness, and let your heart become the rich soil that receives only what you are willing to live. Now, because this truth about words is so simple, many take hold of it too quickly with the surface mind and turn it into a mechanical practice. They hear that speech creates, and immediately they begin repeating phrases all day long, hoping that quantity will substitute for conviction. They say, I am rich, I am rich, I am rich, and yet inwardly remain in the same state of anxiety, the same pressure in the chest, the same secret dread of tomorrow. Then, after some days or weeks, they conclude that the law does not work, when in truth they have not yet applied the law at all. They have only moved their lips. I must tell you plainly, and I say it with compassion because I have watched this mistake cause so much discouragement. An affirmation without feeling is like a seed held in the hand and never planted. You may admire it, count it, repeat its name, and even preach about its potential. But if it never enters the soil, it bears no harvest. Words alone are not the power. Words are the vehicle. Feeling is the power. The state is the power. The inner acceptance is the power. A man may stand before a mirror and say, I am wealthy, 50 times before breakfast, and remain inwardly unchanged. His mouth declares abundance, but his body is braced in fear. His lips speak richness, but his heart whispers, this is not true. I am in danger. I do not have enough. And because the deeper voice is the one impressed upon consciousness, life answers the whisper rather than the declaration. Then he says, why did the universe ignore my words? It did not ignore him. It obeyed him perfectly. It obeyed the feeling he sustained beneath the words. This is the great conflict in so many who attempt affirmations. The lips say one thing, the heart says another. The mouth says, I am secure, while the nervous system says, I am threatened. The tongue says, all is well, while the imagination secretly rehearses loss, embarrassment, rejection, and lack. Outwardly there is affirmation. Inwardly there is contradiction. And the contradiction is not hidden from the creative law. Consciousness receives the dominant feeling tone, not the prettiest sentence. I say this not to discourage you from using affirmations, but to restore them to their rightful place. A true affirmation is not a slogan repeated against your fear. It is a statement arising from a state, or used gently to enter a state. It is not a weapon with which you beat the mind into submission. It is a doorway through which you move into a new feeling of self. If the feeling is absent, do not force the phrase as though repetition alone will save you. First, soften. First, become inwardly still. First, find the mood, however faintly. Then let the words come from that mood. The universe, if I may speak in that way, responds to feeling because feeling is belief in embodied form. Feeling is not mere emotion in the dramatic sense. I do not mean excitement or intensity only. I mean the inward sense of reality, the quiet knowing, the accepted mood, the atmosphere in which you dwell. A man may speak softly and create greatly if he speaks from the feeling of certainty. Another may shout himself hoarse and create nothing new if he remains inwardly unconvinced. I learned this by observing not only myself, but many who came to me longing for change. They were sincere. Many were earnest beyond measure. They read, they repeated, they copied phrases into notebooks, they memorized statements, they disciplined their tongues in public, and yet their lives remained largely unchanged, because their inner state remained untouched. They were trying to paint the fruit while neglecting the root. They were trying to command with words, while still identifying with the old self. There was one student, in particular, whose story I have never forgotten, because it revealed this law so clearly. She came to me burdened by financial strain, and deeply fatigued in spirit. She had heard that affirmations could change one's world, And so she set herself to the task with admirable diligence. Every morning she would rise early, stand by her window, and repeat for a long while, "I am prosperous. I am prosperous. I am prosperous." She told me she did the same again at night. She had filled pages with statements. She could recite them with flawless precision. Yet, as she spoke to me, I could hear the strain in her voice before she had even finished her account. There was a tremor underneath her words, not merely sadness, but effort. The effort of one trying to force herself across a bridge she did not yet believe could hold her. I asked her gently, "When you say, 'I am prosperous,' what do you feel in that moment?" She was surprised by the question. She had expected me, perhaps, to correct the wording or give her a stronger phrase. Instead, she became quiet. Then she said, with honesty that was more valuable than all her repetitions, "I feel afraid. I feel as if I am trying to cover over something. I feel relief for a moment sometimes, but mostly I feel that I am saying it because I must, not because I believe it." And I said to her, "Then you are not affirming prosperity. You are affirming fear while speaking the word prosperity." She looked at me, and I could see both disappointment and hope in her face, because she suddenly understood why all her effort had yielded so little. She was not failing because the law was false. She was failing because she had mistaken verbal repetition for spiritual assumption. I told her, "Do not fight yourself with words. Do not stand at war with your own feeling and call it faith. If your heart is in fear, begin there honestly. Become still. Let the body soften. Let the breath slow. Then ask only this: what would I feel if this burden were truly lifted? Not what words would I say, but what would I feel?" At first, she tried to answer from the intellect. She began to list what she would do, how she would plan, what she would purchase, how she would rearrange her accounts. I stopped her and said, "No, not the actions, the feeling. Would there be relief? Would there be ease in your chest? Would there be quiet? Would there be gratitude? Would there be a sense of safety?" Her eyes filled with tears, not from despair this time, but from recognition. "Yes," she said softly. "Relief, mostly relief, and rest." "Good," I said. "Then do not begin with 'I am prosperous.' Begin with relief. Begin with rest. Let prosperity be the name of a state you enter, not a word you throw at your fear." I instructed her that for several nights she was to stop all strenuous repetition. I told her not to force herself to recite long formulas. Instead, just before sleep, she was to sit quietly and imagine one small, natural moment that would imply the burden had ended. Perhaps sitting at her table with a calm heart, perhaps opening a letter and feeling no fear, perhaps hearing herself say, in a simple and unforced way, "It is all right now." I told her to feel the relief first, even if only for a few moments, and only then to speak one short phrase that matched that feeling. She returned some time later, changed in a way that no mere enthusiasm could counterfeit. Her face was softer, her speech slower. There was less strain in her, more inward space. She told me that the first nights had been difficult because she was so accustomed to laboring mentally. She would begin to feel relief, and then immediately the old habit would rush in, urging her to repeat more, force more, do more. But she persisted in the gentler way. She let herself feel the state rather than perform the phrase. Then something began to move. An overdue payment she had long abandoned as unlikely was returned to her. A relative, with whom she had had no recent discussion of her troubles, offered assistance in a way that preserved her dignity. A small opportunity at work opened into a larger one. But what was most important, and she herself admitted this, was not merely what came, but who she had become while it came. She said, "For the first time, when I said the words, I felt them. I was no longer trying to persuade myself. I was speaking from something real." That is the turning point. When the affirmation ceases to be argument and becomes expression. You see, many use affirmations as though they were trying to convince a hostile universe. They repeat and repeat because they secretly believe the power is outside them and must be persuaded. But consciousness is not hostile to you. It is you. The subconscious does not resist your accepted feeling, it expresses it. Therefore, the work is not to scream louder at the law. The work is to enter the state from which the words are naturally true. If you say, "I am rich," and inwardly recoil, do not conclude that the phrase is wrong. Conclude only that your state has not yet been adjusted. Then become tender with yourself. Do not call yourself a failure. Do not abandon the law. Instead, shorten the distance between where you are and where you wish to be through feeling. Perhaps "I am rich" feels too distant in that moment. Then begin where your imagination can breathe. I am supported. I am safe. I am provided for. Things are changing in my favor. I can feel relief entering. Let the words be ladders, not whips. And even then, remember this, it is not the elegance of the wording, but the reality of the feeling that gives the phrase its creative force. A simple, almost childlike sentence, spoken in peace, can transform a life. A grand and elaborate statement spoken in fear can leave no mark at all. Heaven does not measure eloquence. It measures conviction. I have seen men with little education apply this law more successfully than scholars, because they accepted the feeling directly and did not become lost in verbal craftsmanship. They did not ask, "What is the perfect affirmation?" They asked, knowingly or unknowingly, "What is the state I must enter?" And having entered it, even imperfectly, they saw results, while others, clever in phrase and restless in heart, remained unchanged, though their language was polished. So if you have been repeating affirmations and seeing little movement, do not despair. Do not say, "It does not work for me." That is only another seed of defeat. Say instead, "I now understand the missing element. The missing element is feeling. The missing element is the state. The missing element is the union of word and inner acceptance." Your lips may say wealth, but if your heart says fear, fear is what is planted. Change the heart, and the same words become alive. Change the state, and the phrase becomes command. Change the feeling, and the law has something new to express. As you listen tonight, perhaps already drifting, let this truth sink gently into you. You are not asked to repeat yourself into exhaustion. You are asked to feel your way into a new self and let speech follow. The universe does not reward strain. It mirrors state. It does not respond to how many times you say a sentence, but to what you are when you say it. And once you understand this, affirmations become beautiful again. They become sacred again. Not desperate chanting, but living declarations. Not a battle against fear, but the language of a state already forming within you. Then, when you speak, even softly, the words carry weight. They are no longer empty sounds, passing through the night. They are seeds entering fertile soil. And in due season, the harvest appears. Now let me take you deeper, because even after one understands that words create and that feeling gives those words their power, there still remains a subtler realm where creation is happening every hour of the day, whether you are aware of it or not. I speak of the inner conversation, the silent dialogue you carry on within yourself. This, more than any spoken affirmation, is your true prayer. This is the language that continues when the lips are still. This is the current beneath the surface. And because it is continuous, it is often more powerful than anything you say aloud for a few moments in the morning or at night. Most people believe they pray only when they kneel or when they close their eyes and speak sacred words. But I tell you, you are praying all day long. The man who mutters inwardly, "Nothing ever works for me," is praying. The woman who silently repeats, "I am always behind, I can never catch up," is praying. The one who imagines tomorrow's embarrassment before it happens is praying. Prayer is not merely what you say to God. Prayer is what you consent to inwardly as true. And since God is your own wonderful human imagination, your inner consent is the creative act. If you listen carefully to yourself through the day, you will discover that there is a ceaseless stream of commentary running within you. You look at a letter, and instantly there is an inward sentence. You hear a remark, and inwardly answer it. You remember a bill, a debt, an obligation, and a whole scene of mental speech begins to unfold. You may not even notice it because it has become habitual, but habit does not make it powerless. On the contrary, habit gives it momentum. The words most frequently whispered within become the states most solidly impressed upon consciousness. When I first began to truly observe this in myself, I was astonished. I had already understood much about imagination, yet I found that beneath my formal prayers and deliberate assumptions, there still lived an undercurrent of old conversation. Outwardly, I might declare freedom, but inwardly, during some idle moment, I would hear a phrase pass through me, such as, "What if it does not happen in time?" Or, "How will this be met?" Those silent remarks, if accepted, were as creative as any spoken decree. They were not harmless, because they were private. They were powerful because they were private. You must understand the nature of the subconscious in this matter. It is a faithful servant. It does not mock you, resist you, or debate with you. It does not say, "This statement is wise, I shall accept it, and this one is foolish, I shall reject it." It receives impression according to feeling and repetition of inner consent. It takes the dominant tone of your inner speech as instruction and proceeds to objectify it. If your inward conversation is one of strain, delay, shame, and insufficiency, the subconscious, faithful as ever, organizes your outer world to mirror that state. If your inner conversation becomes one of relief, sufficiency, dignity, and divine order, it serves that with equal obedience. Think of it as a servant in the house who hears your repeated directions. If day after day you tell him, "We are in trouble, we are late, we are embarrassed, we are not provided for," he begins arranging the household according to that command. If instead you say, inwardly and with conviction, "All is well, all is being resolved, I am supplied, I am respected, I move in divine order," he arranges according to that. The servant does not choose the master's mood, he executes it. And in each of us, the subconscious is that faithful servant. This is why I say the inner conversation is the true prayer. Your spoken prayer may last 5 minutes, but your inner talking may go on for 16 waking hours. Which do you suppose has the greater influence if left unchecked? A few noble words spoken consciously, or a long day of inward contradiction? Many pray for abundance in the morning and rehearse lack inwardly until sleep. Then they wonder why the prayer appears unanswered. It was answered, but the dominant prayer was not the formal one. The dominant prayer was the inward conversation sustained throughout the day. Do not condemn yourself when you discover this. Be grateful, for the moment you become aware of your inner speech, you have already gained the key to changing your life. What was unconscious can now become conscious. What was habitual can be revised. What was creating by accident can begin creating by design. And this brings me to one of the most merciful practices I have ever taught and lived: revision. Revision is not pretending the past did not happen. It is redeeming it in imagination, so that its emotional charge and therefore its future consequences are transformed. Men think the past is fixed because the event occurred, but the event as psychologically active within you lies only as memory. And memory is not dead. Memory is living imagination. If you keep replaying a financial humiliation, a moment of scarcity, a scene of rejection, and each time you relive it with the same feeling, you continue to nourish that state. You are not merely remembering, you are recreating. How many carry old money scenes in this way without realizing it? A parent saying, "We cannot afford that." A creditor speaking sharply. A shopkeeper's look. An unpaid notice. A night of fear at the table. A feeling of being less than another because of lack. These scenes are often replayed inwardly for years, and each replay, if felt as before, renews the same inner condition. Then the person says, "This is simply my life." No, it is your inner archive being continually reprinted. Revision allows you to enter that archive and alter the script. You take the scene that wounded you, embarrassed you, frightened you, or hardened your heart, and you rewrite it in imagination as it ought to have been. You do not do this to flatter the ego. You do it to free consciousness from an old state. You replace shame with dignity, fear with relief, scarcity with sufficiency. And because imagination is the only reality, the change made there is not cosmetic. It is causal. Let me show you what I mean in the realm of finances. For many who hear me tonight carry deep impressions around money, debt, and self-worth. Suppose you remember opening a letter and feeling your stomach drop because of what was demanded of you. Suppose the scene still lives in you. Each time you recall it, your body tightens. Your inner voice says, "There it is again. I never escape these things." You may think that is only memory, but in truth, you are praying that state again. Now revise it, return to the scene in imagination, not as a helpless observer, but as the operant power. See the same envelope, if you wish, but let what follows be different. Open it, and instead read words of adjustment, release, or settlement. Hear yourself exhale in relief. Hear yourself say, "How wonderfully this has been resolved." Feel the dignity of being treated fairly. Feel the quiet of no burden. Repeat the revised scene until it feels natural, until the old sting weakens, and a new emotional truth begins to take its place. That is revision. You are not lying to yourself. You are selecting the state from which you shall live. You may revise scenes of scarcity in just the same way. If you remember standing at a counter and feeling you could not buy what you needed, revise it. See yourself purchasing with ease. Feel no inward shrinking. If you remember being unable to meet an obligation and speaking from embarrassment, revise the conversation. Hear yourself speaking calmly, with dignity. Hear the other party respond with understanding. Feel the atmosphere shift. The point is not to produce a theatrical fantasy, but to reclaim your inner posture. Financial freedom is not only numbers on paper, it is also a state of self. If the self remains humiliated, the world will find ways to mirror that. If the self is restored inwardly, the outer world begins to conform. I speak with feeling here because I know what it is to carry the wound of financial pressure and the sting of humiliation. There was a time in my own life when debt pressed upon me so heavily that a simple knock, a letter, or a message could awaken tension in the body before a word was spoken. Outwardly, one tries to remain composed. Inwardly, there is a contraction, an anticipation of demand, a dread of being measured by one's inability in that moment to satisfy what is asked. Those who have known this know the peculiar shame of it, not merely the arithmetic, but the feeling that one's dignity is being weighed. I recall one particular incident with painful clarity, and I share it because it taught me more than many books. I was confronted regarding a debt in a manner that struck me deeply. The details matter less than the inward effect. It was not only that money was owed, it was the manner, the feeling of exposure, the sense of being reduced before another. The outer conversation ended, but inwardly it did not end. For days, the scene replayed itself. I heard the words again. I answered them again. I imagined what I should have said, what I should have been, what I feared I appeared to be, and each replay revived the humiliation. I was carrying that moment like a private prayer of shame. Then I caught myself. I realized I was worshipping the scene by remembering it with feeling. I was giving it life each time I returned to it, in bitterness and embarrassment. And I said to myself, "No, this is not the prayer I choose." That night, instead of allowing the old scene to run as it had been, I deliberately revised it. I sat quietly and entered the same setting in imagination. I saw the same man, but no longer as an accuser in my inner world. I heard him speak differently. I heard kindness where there had been sharpness. I heard resolution where there had been pressure. Most importantly, I felt myself differently. I did not feel smaller. I did not feel cornered. I felt composed, respected, and inwardly free. In the revised scene, I heard words to the effect of, "It is all right. The matter is settled," and I heard myself respond with calm gratitude. I repeated this, not as a desperate effort, but until the emotional wound began to soften, and the revised version felt more real to me inwardly than the old humiliation. Now the rational mind may say, "But the event already happened." Yes, in the realm of facts it had occurred. But the realm of facts is not the source. The source is imagination. And in imagination, I changed the event's meaning, tone, and emotional consequence. I changed the state from which I remembered it, and therefore I changed what could grow from it. What followed outwardly came in a manner that the world would call surprising, though to me it was simply faithful law. Circumstances shifted. Communications came. The pressure around that matter eased, and then resolved in ways I had not arranged by force. The very atmosphere of the situation changed. It was as though life accepted my revised inner conversation as instruction and began to mirror it. Did it happen exactly as in the imaginal scene, word for word? That is not the point. The point is that the state changed first, and then the outer world, being myself pushed out, reflected that change in form. I have seen this again and again. Men continue suffering, not because one event harmed them, but because they keep the harm alive through inner repetition. They re-speak the insult, re-feel the lack, reanimate the fear. Then they pray for freedom while inwardly rehearsing bondage. Revision interrupts this cycle. Revision says, "I am not the prisoner of what was. I am the operant power now." Revision is the mercy by which imagination redeems its own creations. Use it with your money memories. Use it with scenes of debt, embarrassment, missed opportunities, harsh conversations, and private fear. If there was a night you sat counting what was not enough, revise it. See yourself counting with calm and sufficiency. If there was a conversation in which you felt diminished, revise it until you feel dignity restored. If there was a letter that brought dread, revise it until it brings relief. Do not rush this. The point is not to mechanically replace one image with another. The point is to alter the inner conversation and emotional meaning so completely that the subconscious receives a new instruction. And once you begin doing this, you will notice something extraordinary. Your daily inner talking starts to change, even outside of formal revision. The old phrases lose their grip. You begin to catch yourself sooner when you inwardly say, "I cannot," and you replace it with, "It is being resolved." You notice that where you once replayed shame, you now naturally imagine order. The servant has received new instructions. The prayer has changed. Remember this as you listen and perhaps drift towards sleep. The inner conversation is creation in motion. You are always speaking within. Let that inner speech become gentle, dignified, faithful, and free. Let it say of your finances, your obligations, your future, "All things move in divine order. I am supplied, I am respected, I am free." And if some old scene rises to accuse you, do not fear it. Revise it. Bless it by transforming it. Rewrite it in imagination until your heart no longer bows to it. For the outer world does not merely reflect what happened to you. It reflects what you continue to say within yourself about what happened. Change that inward prayer, and the world, in its own appointed way, will answer. Now we come to what I have called, and will always call, the great secret. Many can understand the words intellectually, and many can even observe their inner conversations with some discipline. Yet still they wonder why the outer world does not move as swiftly as they had hoped. The reason is simple, and it is profound. The true motor of creation is feeling. The word gives shape, yes. The imaginal act gives pattern, yes. But feeling gives life. Feeling is the animating power. Feeling is the secret. When I use the word feeling, I do not mean mere sentimentality, nor passing emotion in the shallow sense. I mean the deep inner acceptance of a state as true. I mean the emotional tone in which you live. I mean the atmosphere of consciousness you return to again and again when no one is watching, when no performance is needed, when your heart speaks in its own language. That atmosphere is your future in seed form. It is not what you occasionally say that determines your life. It is what you predominantly feel yourself to be. You may speak a sentence of wealth while feeling poor. You may affirm freedom while feeling trapped. You may declare peace while inwardly trembling. And if there is conflict between the word and the feeling, feeling will decide the harvest. Not because the law is cruel, but because the law is exact. The subconscious receives what is felt as real. The outer world mirrors the dominant emotional conviction, not the decorative language laid on top of fear. This is why I say feeling is the currency of heaven. Heaven, as I use the term, is not a distant place beyond the sky. It is the invisible realm of creative causation, the world of imagination, the inner kingdom from which all visible facts descend. And in that kingdom, feeling is the only coin accepted. You cannot purchase a new state with empty words. You cannot enter abundance while paying inwardly with anxiety. You cannot claim freedom while emotionally investing in bondage. The entrance fee to any desired state is the feeling of its reality. A man may say, I desire financial freedom, and yet every time he thinks of money, he feels pressure in his chest, contraction in his belly, haste in his breathing, and dread in his mind. Then whatever he says with his lips is overruled by what he pays with feeling. Another may have little in the moment by worldly measurement, and yet inwardly he cultivates relief, trust, gratitude, and quiet sufficiency. He is already using the currency of heaven, and in time the outer world must honor that inner payment. You must begin to see your dominant emotional state as a prophecy, not a superstition, not a poetic phrase, but a law. If your dominant mood is anxiety about tomorrow, the world will arrange symbols and events to justify that anxiety. If your dominant mood is quiet expectation, relief, and gratitude, the world will arrange itself to mirror and confirm that state. Reality, as men call it, is not merely happening. It is answering. It is reflecting the emotional atmosphere in which you dwell. This is why so many become discouraged. They change thoughts for a few moments, but not their feeling. They say, I tried to think positively, but the state beneath remained unchanged. The tone remained fear. The body remained braced. The imagination remained in debt, while the lips spoke prosperity. And then they conclude the law does not work. The law works perfectly. It simply answered the deeper offering. If you truly wish to prove this in your own life, begin with something very practical and very gentle. Do not first try to force a gigantic emotional transformation all at once. Instead, ask yourself, what would relief feel like if this were already handled? Not how would it happen? Not when will it happen? Not who will do it? What would relief feel like? That question is a door. For many, the first genuine shift in manifestation is not excitement, but relief. Not triumph, but release. The shoulders soften, the breath deepens. The mind stops racing, the body receives the message, the burden is gone. That relief before the payment is a creative act. Most wait for payment to feel relief, but the law asks you to reverse the order. Feel relief first, and let the payment follow as shadow follows form. I do not say pretend in a strained way. I say enter the state inwardly and taste the emotional fact of completion. If the debt were settled, how would you breathe tonight? Breathe that way now. If the matter were resolved, how would your body feel lying in bed? Feel that now. If the letter had already come with good news, what quiet would enter your chest? Enter that quiet now. This is not self-deception, this is causation, and gratitude before the income is equally powerful. The world teaches gratitude after receiving, and there is nothing wrong in thanking after the fact. But the deeper law is gratitude before evidence. Gratitude is not merely politeness toward events. Gratitude is the feeling tone of having. When I am inwardly grateful before the visible arrival, I am no longer standing as one who begs. I am standing as one who knows. Gratitude says, without words if necessary, it is already mine in the unseen, and I welcome its appearance in time. Many think gratitude must be dramatic, emotional, overflowing to be effective. Not so. The truest gratitude is often quiet. It is the soft inward thank you that rises naturally when one feels provided for even before the provision is seen. It is the calm appreciation that replaces panic. It is the gentle confidence with which one moves through the day. This gratitude nourishes the seed. It keeps the field fertile. It prevents the mind from digging up what was planted in faith. I learned this not merely from theory, but through hard necessity, and especially during a period in New York when financial strain pressed upon me so intensely that all my understanding was forced to become practice. New York, with its speed, its pressure, its demands, can reveal to a man exactly what state he is truly in. There was a season in my life there when obligations seemed larger than the means visible before me. The mind, if left to itself, found endless reasons to calculate, worry, and rehearse failure. I knew the teachings. I knew the law. Yet I discovered that knowledge without embodiment is like a lamp unlit. At first, I attempted what many attempt. I changed my thoughts, or rather, I tried to. I repeated noble phrases. I corrected certain mental statements. I would say, all is well, and I am supplied. Yet inwardly, in the body and in the emotional field, I had not truly shifted. The words were changed, but the feeling beneath them remained strained. I was still watching circumstances for proof. I was still secretly measuring, still inwardly leaning toward fear. And because the feeling had not changed, there was little movement outwardly. The law was not withholding from me. It was reflecting me. This was a great lesson, and a humbling one. It showed me that changing thought alone, while useful, is not enough. If the emotional state remains untouched, a thought can be spoken mechanically. Feeling cannot be feigned for long. The body reveals the truth of one's state. The breath reveals it, the tone reveals it, the tone reveals it, the quality of rest at night reveals it. I saw clearly that I had changed the language of the surface while preserving the vibration of lack underneath. Then there came a night, and I remember it vividly, when I ceased trying to force the mind into agreement and instead turned wholly to feeling. I said in effect, let me stop arguing with appearances. Let me feel what I would feel if this were already resolved. I did not begin by trying to picture every detail. I began with relief. I began with the sensation of burden lifted. I allowed myself to experience, in imagination, the physical and emotional release of being free of the pressure. I felt the shoulders soften. I felt the chest open. I felt the mind become quiet. I felt gratitude rise, not because anything visible had changed yet, but because inwardly I had accepted a different state. That night was a turning point, not because I had invented a clever technique, but because I finally used the law properly. I changed feeling. I paid with the right currency. I went to sleep not as the man wrestling with a problem, but as the man who had entered relief. And I tell you plainly, the outer movement began only after that change. Not after I had thought differently in words, but after I had felt differently in truth. Within days, and then over a short span, events began to move in ways that the anxious mind could never have arranged by strain. Openings appeared. Means came. Adjustments occurred. Relationships and circumstances shifted. What had seemed fixed was not fixed at all. It had only been reflecting a previous emotional state. When the state changed, the mirror responded. I saw again with renewed certainty that the world is not moved by our mental chatter, but by our embodied conviction. You must understand how liberating this is. If future reality is tied to your dominant emotional state, then you are not trapped by current appearances. You are not waiting helplessly for the world to become kind before you can feel at peace. You can begin now. You can choose the feeling of the wish fulfilled now. You can enter relief now. You can enter gratitude now. You can enter quiet confidence now. And because feeling is causal, the future begins to rearrange the moment you do. This is why I urge you not merely to think of abundance, but to feel the emotional texture of abundance. What is its texture? It is not always excitement. Often it is ease. It is spaciousness. It is the absence of inner scrambling. It is a steady sense that there is enough, that all things are working together, that supply is not a miracle to be begged for, but a law to be allowed. If you can cultivate this feeling and return to it often, you are living in the state that must objectify as visible provision. Likewise, if you wish to dissolve debt consciousness, do not merely repeat statements against debt. Feel what debtlessness feels like. Feel the dignity of no pressure. Feel the calm of no dread when opening a letter. Feel the simple, ordinary peace of moving through a day without inward tightening at the thought of money. This ordinary peace, when felt as natural, is more powerful than many dramatic affirmations shouted from fear. The law responds to naturalness. The subconscious accepts what feels real and familiar. Therefore, make the feeling of freedom familiar. And when I say dominant emotional state becomes future reality, I do not mean every passing mood instantly hardens into fact. Men sometimes fear this teaching because they imagine every fleeting shadow creates disaster. No, it is the dominant state, the one you return to, the one you nourish, the one you accept as identity, that forms the future. If fear arises, do not fear the fear. Observe it, bless it, and shift again. If doubt visits, let it pass through without enthroning it. Return to the chosen feeling. Return to relief. Return to gratitude. Return to the quiet knowing. This repeated return is how a state becomes dominant. If you are listening while the body grows heavy and the mind begins to soften, this is a perfect moment to practice. Do not strain. Simply ask within, very gently, what would relief feel like if all were now settled? Then let the answer come as a sensation rather than a sentence. Perhaps your jaw softens. Perhaps the stomach unclenches. Perhaps the breath drops lower in the body. Perhaps a simple inward thank you rises. Stay there. This is the secret in practice. Not argument, not force, feeling. And let gratitude come before the income as naturally as dawn before full light. Say inwardly, if you wish, thank you for the supply, now moving toward me in ways I need not manage by fear. Feel gratitude before the evidence, and you have already begun to live from the end. You are no longer reacting to life. You are generating the state that life must mirror. I tell you from experience, and especially from those difficult and instructive days in New York, that a change of thought without a change of feeling may soothe the surface for a moment, but a change of feeling sets the law in motion. Thought can point you toward a state. Feeling enters it. Thought can name the country. Feeling crosses the border. Thought can say, I am free. Feeling knows, quietly and bodily. It is done. So do not be discouraged if you have spoken many words and seen little movement. Ask instead, what have I been feeling as true? This question will save you years. And once you know the answer, do not condemn the past. Simply begin now to feel differently. Relief before the payment. Gratitude before the income. Peace before the proof. This is the secret. This is the coin of heaven. This is the beginning of visible change. Now, if you have followed me this far, you will understand why I have delayed speaking of method in a mechanical way. I did not wish to give you a technique before giving you a foundation, for a method in the hands of fear becomes superstition, but a method in the hands of understanding becomes revelation. And so now I will speak of that blessed borderland which I have used again and again, the state akin to sleep, not as a cold procedure, but as a holy doorway through which the imaginal act passes most easily into embodiment. There is a moment every night known to all men, though few use it consciously. It is the frontier between waking and sleep. You do not cross it with fanfare. You do not hear a bell announcing your entry. You simply begin to drift. The body grows heavy. The limbs loosen. The eyes no longer wish to open. Sant lose their sharp edges. The world of facts begins to recede, and another world, more fluid, more impressionable, draws near. This is the threshold. This is the border where the logical mind retreats and the deeper self stands open. In the waking state, the mind argues, compares, calculates, resists. It asks how, when, by what means, through whom. It measures what is visible and calls that prudence. In its proper place, this mind is useful. It helps a man move through the affairs of the day. But in the work of creation, it often becomes the guard at the gate, refusing entrance to anything that does not resemble yesterday. It is forever saying, "This is impossible," simply because it has not yet seen the bridge of incidents. It mistakes present appearance for final truth. Yet every night, by divine mercy, this guard grows drowsy. The rigid watchman relaxes. The questioning voice softens. The impulse to analyze weakens. The mind that spent the day trying to manage life begins to release its grip. And when it does, the subconscious, which receives impressions and externalizes them, stands open like fertile ground after rain. You need not force open this door. It opens naturally each night. Your part is only to enter it consciously. This is why I have always treasured that drowsy condition. In that state, imagination accepts impression with a readiness that is harder to reach in full waking tension. The subconscious does not reason as the conscious mind does. It does not argue, it receives. It accepts what is impressed upon it with feeling. It takes the imaginal act as seed, and in its own way and time brings forth corresponding fact. It is a faithful servant, but it obeys the impression, not your occasional wish. Therefore, the moment before sleep is among the most sacred moments in your day, for there the impression may be given with minimal interference. Do not think of this as something strange or difficult. Think of it as returning to the natural order. Every child knows how to drift into imagined worlds before sleep. The child does it effortlessly. He lies in bed and feels himself elsewhere, doing, having, becoming. He enters the scene without strain. The trouble with the adult is not lack of imagination, but overgrown tension. He has become too loyal to appearances, too devoted to evidence, too practiced in rehearsing worry as he falls asleep. And so he gives the subconscious the wrong impression, night after night, and then wonders why tomorrow resembles yesterday. I say to you plainly, never go to sleep in fear if you can help it. I do not say this to burden you with another rule, but to free you from an invisible habit. To fall asleep in fear is to hand the subconscious a blueprint of anxiety and ask it to build more of the same. To sleep while inwardly rehearsing bills, humiliation, deadlines, and dread is not harmless mental noise. It is instruction. The subconscious receives the mood, the impression, the emotional signature, and sets about objectifying it. Men do this unknowingly and call the result fate. If, before sleep, you review the day and relive its injuries, if you lie there inwardly arguing with people, defending yourself, fearing tomorrow, and imagining loss, then you are sowing in the dark. Sleep does not cancel creation. Sleep continues it. Indeed, sleep often deepens it, because the conscious resistance is gone. So understand the tenderness and seriousness of this hour. The final mood you carry into sleep is not merely a passing feeling. It is often the seed of tomorrow's experience. And yet do not be afraid if you have slept in fear many nights. Most have. I did. The point is not condemnation. The point is awakening. Tonight can be different. This very night you may enter sleep, not as one pursued by circumstance, but as one who has given a new impression. You may sleep in fulfillment. You may fall asleep in the feeling that the matter is resolved, that the burden is lifted, that the unseen work is done. And if you do, you will begin to learn what prophets and mystics have always known. Sleep can become an act of faith rather than an escape from worry. When I speak of sleeping in fulfillment, I do not mean you must generate some exaggerated ecstasy before the pillow. Fulfillment is often quiet. It may feel like relief. It may feel like peace. It may feel like the simple cessation of inner struggle. It may be nothing more dramatic than a settled knowing. It is done. If this feeling is genuine, even softly so, it is enough. The subconscious asks not for theatrical emotion, but for reality of impression. A little true feeling outweighs much forced intensity. Now let me show you how gently this may be approached. As the hour of sleep comes, do not rush into bed carrying the entire day's argument with you. Let the body become still. Let the breath slow. Feel the weight of your body sinking into support. This alone begins to loosen the grip of the waking mind. You are not trying to perform. You are yielding. You are letting the mind descend into receptivity. And as you begin to feel drowsy, choose one simple imaginal act that implies your desire is already fulfilled. Choose a scene so natural that were your wish already fact, it would carry no strain. It might be a friend's voice saying, "I am so happy for you." It might be your own hands opening a letter that confirms what you desired. It might be the feeling of lying in bed with no pressure in your chest because all is settled. It might be hearing yourself say, quietly and truthfully, "Thank God it is done." Keep it simple. The power is not in complexity. The power is in feeling the reality of the scene from within. And mark this well, do not see yourself from a distance as though watching a play. Be in the scene. See what you would see if it were true. Hear what you would hear. Touch what you would touch. Let imagination become sensory and immediate. If you imagine a letter, feel the texture of the paper. If you imagine a handshake, feel the contact. If you imagine a room, sense its atmosphere. Above all, feel the emotional consequence of fulfillment. Not the desire itself, but its completion. The state akin to sleep makes this easier, because the ordinary sharpness of critical thought is fading. In that drowsy border, you need not battle the mind so much. You need only return, gently and repeatedly, to the scene and the feeling. If attention wanders, return without frustration. If old thoughts intrude, let them pass and resume the chosen impression. You are not wrestling a beast, you are impressing a field. Gentleness works better here than force. The field receives what is steadily felt, not what is violently shouted. Many have asked me, though in different language, how long must I do it? And I tell them the question itself often comes from the anxious mind. Do it until the feeling of reality touches you. Do it until the scene feels natural enough that you could sleep in it. Do it until relief replaces strain. Then let sleep take you. Do not keep checking whether you have done it properly. Sleep in the state. Let the final act of the day be fulfillment, not examination. There is wisdom in this that goes beyond money or any single desire. The state akin to sleep is a daily invitation to reorder the self. By day, you may be jostled by appearances, by conversations, by obligations, by habits of reaction. But by night, you are given a quiet chamber in which to choose again. Each night you may withdraw allegiance from fear and give it to fulfillment. Each night you may cease handing the subconscious old images of lack and instead impress it with peace, relief, abundance, reconciliation, health, freedom. In time, these nightly impressions build a new man. I have seen those who wasted years in strain begin to change swiftly once they learned this art, not because they became more forceful, but because they became more faithful in that sacred borderland. They stopped using the moments before sleep to rehearse defeat. They stopped carrying arguments into dreams. They stopped falling asleep in the state of not yet, and instead they entered the night as one enters a sanctuary, bearing an offering of fulfilled feeling. Do you see the tenderness of this? You need not conquer the world before bed. You need only choose what to carry into the darkness. Sleep will carry it farther than conscious effort can. The subconscious, once impressed, continues the work while you rest. It arranges, reshapes, bridges, and externalizes according to the seed received. You do not need to dictate the route. Your part is to give the impression. Its part is to unfold the bridge of incidents. And so I say again, with all the seriousness born of experience, never sleep in fear if you can avoid it. If fear rises, do not fight it harshly. Replace it, give the mind a different object. Give the heart a different feeling. If you cannot yet feel triumphant, feel relieved. If you cannot feel relieved fully, feel willing to be relieved. If you cannot yet feel complete gratitude, whisper a quiet thank you for what is now moving unseen. Let even a small genuine shift be your final mood. That small shift repeated becomes a new destiny. There were nights in my own life when the outer world gave me no visible reason for peace, and yet I learned to enter sleep as though the matter were already settled. At first, this felt like discipline. Later, it became delight. For I discovered that to sleep in fulfillment is one of the sweetest forms of faith. It is to lay the head down, not as a beggar waiting for tomorrow to judge him, but as a creator who has sown consciously and now rests. It is Sabbath in miniature. It is the daily rehearsal of completed being. And if you listen to these words, while your own body grows heavy, then let this become practice now. Let the eyes rest. Let the breath lengthen. Let the day fade. Feel the borderland approaching, that gentle threshold where waking loosens and dream begins. As you enter it, do not carry the old burden. Carry fulfillment. Carry relief. Carry the quiet fact that what you desire has already been accepted in imagination. Let the mind's logic retire without ceremony. Let the subconscious open. Let the impression be given. Fall asleep, not in the state of asking, but in the state of having. Not in fear, but in fulfillment. Not in strain, but in the soft certainty that the seed has been planted. And when you do this faithfully, night after night, you will discover that sleep itself becomes an ally in creation, and the mornings begin to reflect the peace you dared to feel before the world gave you permission. There came a night in my life when everything I had taught in fragments gathered itself into one living certainty. I did not enter that night as a master of my mind. I entered it tired. I entered it worn by pressure. I entered it with the human feeling that many of you know so well. The feeling of having carried an invisible weight all day and still not knowing how the morning would greet you. Outwardly, nothing dramatic had happened. There was no thunder, no sign in the sky, no sudden rescue in the world of facts. Yet inwardly, I had reached a point of stillness, born not of victory, but of exhaustion. I had ceased arguing. That is what made the night different. I had ceased trying to force an answer. I had ceased repeating words merely to drown out fear. I had ceased attempting to persuade myself by effort. It was not one of those nights when a man sits upright and declares 1,000 affirmations to prove his faith. It was quieter than that. I was lying between waking and sleep in that tender borderland of which I have spoken, and my whole being was suspended in a kind of receptive silence. Let me be very clear, because this matters deeply. What came to me then was not an affirmation I was repeating. It was not a sentence I had decided in advance to say. It was not the product of reasoning, and it was not the result of mental strain. I was not composing a clever spiritual formula. I was not searching through scripture in memory. I was not trying to invent something powerful. The mind that invents was receding. The one that calculates was quiet. The one that worries had, for a moment, grown too tired to continue. And in that softened state, when I was neither fully awake nor fully asleep, I became aware of a voice. I do not mean a voice heard by the ears, as one hears another person in the room. I mean an interior voice, clear beyond argument, intimate beyond language, and yet carrying an authority unlike ordinary thought. It was not the restless stream of my own mental chatter. It did not feel like the usual self-talk that rises and fades through the day. It came with a quality of revelation, as though something deeper than the surface mind had spoken from the center of being itself. Many people, when they hear such words, at once become curious in the wrong way. They wish to seize the phrase, while ignoring the condition in which it was received. They think the power is hidden in syllables, as though one could take a sentence in the waking mind, repeat it mechanically, and obtain the same result. But that is not how this happened, and not how creation works. The phrase mattered, yes, but it mattered because of the state in which it was heard and the feeling with which it landed. It was not sound alone. It was revelation clothed in sound. The voice spoke 7 words. I heard them as clearly as I have ever heard anything inwardly. They did not arrive as command from an outside deity standing apart from me. They arose from within, from the depth where the human and the divine meet. And when they were heard, they did not produce excitement in me so much as recognition. That is the strangest and loveliest part of such moments. You do not feel that you have learned something foreign. You feel that you have remembered something eternal. The words did not feel new. They felt true. The 7 words were these: You are already what you want to be. When I heard them, I did not feel the urge to analyze them. I did not begin asking, what do they mean? How can this be? What about my present circumstances? No, the power of that moment was precisely that the questioning mind was quiet. I heard them in the state akin to sleep, and because I heard them there, they entered me as fact rather than theory. They fell into consciousness, not as philosophy, but as reality. And with them came a stillness, a relief so deep that I understood in one flash what years of effort had failed to teach me completely. You are already what you want to be. Do you hear the difference between that and the language of striving? It does not say, try harder, and you may become it. It does not say, perhaps one day if you are worthy, if conditions change, if fortune smiles. It does not say, ask long enough and it will be granted. It reveals identity, not effort. It speaks from the end, not toward it. It does not flatter desire. It dissolves distance. It tells the soul that what it seeks as future is already true in the invisible present. And the instant I heard those words in that receptive state, I felt the burden begin to lose its reality. Not because all outer things changed, that very second before my eyes, but because the center from which I viewed them changed. I was no longer a man trying to become free. I was seeing, however briefly and beautifully, that freedom was the truth and bondage the temporary shadow. I was no longer a beggar, asking life to release me. I was consciousness recognizing itself as the source. Now listen carefully, because this is where many miss the secret. The 7 words are powerful, but not as a charm. They are not magical because they are 7. They are not effective because they are repeated by the lips. Their power is revealed only when they are heard or spoken from the right state. If you repeat, you are already what you want to be, while inwardly trembling, measuring, doubting, and clinging to appearances, then you may admire the sentence, but remain unchanged. It will become another beautiful phrase laid over an old vibration. But if those same words are received in a softened, surrendered, inwardly receptive state, especially in that drowsy borderland where the deeper mind is open, then they descend as seed. They do not remain in the intellect. They become assumption, and assumption persisted in hardens into fact. That was the law operating in me that night. The words did not persuade me by argument. They impressed me by revelation. They were not information. They were transmission. What changed me was not merely hearing 7 words. It was hearing them from the state in which the soul can accept truth without resistance. It was hearing them when I was no longer defending my limitation. It was hearing them when the old man of effort had gone quiet enough for the deeper I am to speak. And because the words were heard from that state, I could feel what they implied. I could feel the strange and holy relief of no longer postponing my being. That relief is the evidence. That peace is the seal. If after hearing or speaking a phrase, you feel driven, strained, anxious, and compelled to force results, you have not yet entered the state. But if a phrase, however simple, carries you into stillness, into quiet certainty, into the feeling that the matter is already rooted in the unseen, then you have touched the creative center. Then the words have become living. Then the command has been heard. I tell you this because I do not wish you to worship my experience as though revelation belonged only to another age or another man. The same depth that spoke in me speaks in you. The same inner voice that reveals truth beyond reason lives in every being. But It is often drowned out by noise, by fear, by endless mental commentary, by the habit of consulting appearances before consulting consciousness. You need not imitate my exact night. You need not wait for some dramatic voice. But you must understand the principle. Revelation comes when striving subsides and receptivity opens. There are nights when a man chases an answer and gets only more thought. There are nights when he yields and truth rises by itself. That night, I yielded. I did not know I was about to receive what I received. I had stopped trying to manufacture breakthrough. I had become quiet enough to hear. And in that hearing, I understood in living form what I had taught in words, that the desired state is not created in the future. It is occupied now in imagination and accepted by feeling. So if you take anything from what I am saying, let it be this: do not search merely for the right phrase, seek the right state. Do not become a collector of affirmations while remaining inwardly unchanged. Do not think salvation lies in vocabulary. The phrase may be simple, the state is everything. A true word heard in the wrong state remains poetry. A simple word heard in the right state becomes destiny. Even now, as you listen in that gentle rhythm that belongs to the night, let these 7 words not be a formula to clutch, but a doorway to enter. Hear them slowly. Hear them inwardly. Let them descend without argument. You are already what you want to be. Do not ask how. Do not consult the evidence. Do not negotiate with the old story. Let the words fall into the stillness beneath thought. Let them be heard from the state of soft receptivity, the state akin to sleep, where the subconscious receives impression as fact. If you can hear them there, truly hear them, you will notice a shift, perhaps small at first, a loosening in the chest, a quieting of urgency, a sense that the chase has paused, a subtle dignity returning to your being. That is the beginning. That is not imagination pretending. That is imagination awakening. And from that awakening, money, opportunity, restoration, and outward change begin to move, not because the words were magical sounds, but because your state has changed, and the world must reflect it. For the power was never in the 7 words alone. The power was and is in the state from which they are heard. Now that I have told you of that night and of the 7 words as they were heard within me, we may go deeper into the law itself, for revelation must become understanding, and understanding must become practice. It is one thing to hear truth and feel its beauty. It is another to know how truth becomes flesh in the world of experience. And here, my friend, we come to a union so central, so essential, that without it all spiritual effort becomes either emotion without direction or language without power. Creation is a marriage. I do not speak now in metaphor merely for poetry's sake, but to reveal law. Every true manifestation is born of a union. The word gives shape. Feeling gives life. The word is the form, the outline, the pattern impressed upon consciousness. Feeling is the animating force, the breath, the warmth, the living current. If you separate them, nothing is born. If you unite them, the unseen is compelled to take on visible form. I have watched men and women fail because they had one without the other. Some possess words in abundance. They can quote scripture, repeat affirmations, speak noble phrases, and yet their lives remain unchanged because their words are hollow forms, not living seeds. Others have great emotion but no deliberate direction. They feel intensely. They long deeply. They desire strongly, but without a conscious word to give their feeling form. Their emotional force scatters itself and produces confusion rather than creation. The law is fulfilled only in union. Word is form. Feeling is life. Take those 2 sentences and keep them close, for they explain why so many labor and see little result. They mistake repetition for creation. They mistake excitement for faith. They mistake vocabulary for conviction. But the universe, if I may use that term in the way many understand it, does not respond to language as language. It responds to states of consciousness. And a state is not composed of words alone. It is composed of meaning felt as reality. When I speak a word from the surface of the mind, I have only uttered sound. When I speak a word from the depth of being and feel its truth as already established, I have performed an act of creation. In that moment, the word ceases to be a statement and becomes an event in consciousness. It is no longer something I am saying, it is something I am being, and whatever I am being inwardly must, in time, externalize itself. This is why the ancient phrase, "the word became flesh," is not merely theology to me. It is psychology, metaphysics, and daily law. The word becomes flesh when it is embodied in feeling, not when it is admired, not when it is repeated anxiously, not when it is shouted at the heavens in fear. It becomes flesh when it is accepted inwardly with the feeling of naturalness. Then the seed is planted in living soil. Let me put it plainly in the simplest manner. If I say, "Oiriti, boss," then the word and the feeling are not married. They are in conflict. The form says freedom, but the life within it is bondage. What then will be born? Not freedom. The deeper feeling will prevail. The feeling is the blood of the word. It reveals what the word truly means in consciousness. A beautiful form filled with fear produces fear in finer clothing. But if I speak even a small phrase, even something as simple as, "It is done," and in speaking it I feel the relief, the finality, the peace of completion, then word and feeling have united. The form is clear. The life is present. Creation is finished in that instant, though the senses may not yet bear witness to it. The unseen act is complete. Time then becomes only the process by which the visible catches up to the invisible. I learned this not in abstraction, but through necessity. There was a time when I faced what seemed to the outer mind an impossible debt. I use that word deliberately, because to reason it was impossible. The figures stood before me like a wall. There were obligations I could not at that moment see how to meet, and I knew the old habit well, to calculate endlessly, to worry under the appearance of prudence, to rehearse every fearful possibility, to speak of pressure as though repeating it might somehow dissolve it. But I had already seen too much of the law to return fully to that old bondage. Still, let me be honest. Knowledge alone does not always immediately silence the senses. There were moments when the facts seemed loud. There were moments when the body felt the strain before the soul reasserted its knowing. And in such a season, one evening, I withdrew from the outer turmoil and sat quietly with the matter, not to wrestle with it, but to end it inwardly. I did not begin with many words. I had no desire for long speeches. The soul does not require ornament when it is ready to create. I allowed myself first to enter the feeling of the end. I asked, not in language but in inward sensing, what would it be like if this were truly finished, if the burden were gone, if the matter were resolved entirely? I did not ask how. I did not ask through whom. I did not ask by what channel. I asked only for the feeling of completion. At first there was still some resistance, some lingering echo of the facts. Then, gently, I let the feeling come. I felt the body exhale. I felt the chest loosen. I felt that peculiar sweetness of release that comes when a man knows there is nothing more to fear in that matter. I felt the quiet dignity of one who owes no apology to circumstance, because the inner decree has been made. And when that feeling had become real enough to hold, I spoke the words, only 3 words, very softly, almost as a whisper to my own being. It is finished. I did not speak them as hope. I did not speak them to persuade God to act. I did not speak them to deny the senses in panic. I spoke them from the feeling of completion already accepted inwardly. In that moment, the words were form. The feeling was life. And because the two were one, the act was creative. It is finished. I can still tell you the quality of that moment more than the sound of it. There was no excitement in the ordinary sense, no dramatic emotion, no strain, no compulsion to repeat the phrase again and again. That is one of the surest signs that the union has taken place. When the word is truly joined to feeling, there is rest. A Sabbath follows. You do not feel driven to keep digging up the seed to see if it has begun to grow. You feel the matter has passed from your hands into law. So I let it be. I did not continue working on it inwardly that night. I did not return to pleading. I did not begin a fresh campaign of affirmations. I entered sleep in the mood of completion. And in the days that followed, I kept watch, not by anxious checking, but by guarding my state. Whenever the old pressure tried to rise, I returned not to argument, but to the feeling behind the words, finished, settled, complete. Now the outer world did not instantly rearrange itself in one theatrical moment. It moved in what I have often called a bridge of incidents. This is how the law commonly works. Events unfolded naturally enough that an unawakened mind might call them coincidence, and yet with a precision too exact to be accidental. An unexpected contact, a delayed matter resolved, a financial adjustment I had not anticipated, assistance appearing through channels I had not planned, credits where I expected demands, doors opening where there had seemed only walls. The sequence itself mattered less than the fact that the burden that had appeared impossible was in due course resolved. And when it was resolved, I did not think, what luck! I knew the law had simply externalized what had been finished in consciousness. The resolution was unexpected in its pathway, yes, but not in its principle. The outer world had obeyed the inner marriage. The words had given form. The feeling had given life. Reality had yielded the harvest. This is what I long for you to understand. As you listen in the stillness of night, the phrase, "it is finished," was not powerful because of tradition, nor because others have spoken it, nor because of dramatic association. It was powerful because in that moment I entered the state to which the phrase belongs. Had I spoken the same words from fear, they would have been only sound. Spoken from fulfillment, they became law in motion. You may use these words yourself if they feel natural to you, but do not borrow my phrase while ignoring the state. Another phrase may suit you better. It may be, "it is done." It may be, "all is settled." It may be, "I am free." The exact form matters less than people imagine. What matters is that the word be true to the feeling you are cultivating, and that the feeling be true to the fulfilled state you choose to inhabit. Remember this always. The word is not a substitute for feeling, and feeling is not a substitute for the word. The word shapes. Feeling animates. The word directs. Feeling empowers. The word declares what is so. Feeling accepts it as so. Their union is conception. Manifestation is but the birth. There is a tenderness to this law when rightly understood. You need not strain to force emotion. You need not manufacture intensity. Feeling is not theatrical display. It is inward conviction, often quiet, often gentle, sometimes no more than a deep sense of relief and naturalness. A whisper spoken in genuine completion is more creative than 100 loud declarations spoken in secret fear. The soil need not shout to make the seed grow. It need only receive it. And so, when you next approach your desire, whether it concerns money, peace, health, or any burden that has seemed immovable, do not begin by asking what words are most powerful. Begin by asking, what would I feel if this were already resolved? Sit with that. Let the body learn the answer. Let the nervous system taste completion before the senses report it. Then, from that state, speak your word. Let it be simple. Let it be final. Let it be alive. If you do this, you will discover a strange and lovely thing. The phrase you speak may be short, but it will carry weight. It will feel as though it descends from deeper than thought. And after it is spoken, a stillness will come. Guard that stillness. Cherish it. It is the sign that the marriage has taken place, and the seed has been conceived in consciousness. For creation is always this holy union. Word as form, feeling as life. And when the two become one within you, the world has already begun to change, even before your eyes can yet behold it. Now we come to a truth that very few accept at once, though it is among the most liberating in all my teaching. After the inner act, you must rest. I do not mean postponement. I do not mean indifference. I do not mean that dull resignation which says, well, perhaps it will happen one day. I mean the Sabbath of consciousness, the deep interior stillness that follows a true act of creation. I mean the quiet certainty that arises when a thing has been done inwardly and therefore must, in due season, appear outwardly. This rest is not weakness, it is faith in its purest form. Most people imagine faith to be effort. They think faith means straining harder, repeating more, forcing the mind to hold the image, speaking the affirmation again and again as though repetition itself could compensate for unbelief. But I tell you, repetition born of fear is not faith. It is anxiety wearing spiritual clothing. It is the mind confessing, I do not yet believe what I have said, and trying to overcome doubt by quantity. Yet the law does not respond to quantity. It responds to conviction. Faith is rest. The moment this becomes clear to you, a great burden falls away. You cease trying to create by pressure. You cease trying to help the law do its work. You cease digging up the seed to check whether it has begun to sprout. And in that cessation, creation moves more swiftly, because you are no longer interfering with your own command. I learned this through my own mistakes. There were times in my earlier practice when I would perform the imaginal act, feel it vividly, speak the word, and then, because the outer world did not at once conform, I would begin again in agitation. I would repeat the same act, but now with strain. I would say, it is done, and then an hour later, say it again, with less peace and more desperation. By evening I had spoken the truth many times, but not from the same state. What had happened? I had moved from creation into labor, from faith into effort, from quiet knowing into mental compulsion. And because I had not rested, I had not truly accepted. There came a night when I saw this plainly. I had imagined, I had spoken, and yet I found myself again trying to make it work. Then a simple understanding rose in me, like a clear bell. If I truly believed it was done, why would I still be struggling? My effort was revealing my disbelief. My repetition was not strengthening faith. It was exposing fear. That realization changed everything. I became still and said inwardly, very gently, if it is finished, then I may rest. And in that moment, I felt the difference between spiritual effort and spiritual authority. Effort pushes. Authority declares and rests. Effort checks. Authority knows. Effort is noisy. Authority is quiet. This is why I speak of the Sabbath, not as a day on a calendar, but as a state of consciousness. In the old symbolism, God creates and then rests. Why does he rest? Not because he is weary. The infinite does not tire. He rests because creation is complete. Rest is the sign of completion. Rest is the seal upon the work. Rest says, it is good. Rest says, nothing further is required of me inwardly. Rest says, the seed has been planted, and law will do the rest. This is faith. If you want to know whether you have truly performed the inner act, do not ask first whether the world has changed. Ask whether you can rest. Can you be still after speaking your command? Can you sleep without returning to fear? Can you move through the next day without compulsively checking for proof? Can you let the unseen remain unseen for a time without panic? If you can, then you have entered the Sabbath. If you cannot, then do not condemn yourself, but understand that the remedy is not more frantic repetition. The remedy is to return to the feeling of fulfillment until rest naturally follows. The farmer teaches this law perfectly, though most fail to see it. A farmer plants the seed, covers it, and leaves it in the ground. He does not dig it up each morning to inspect its progress. He does not stand over the field, shouting at the soil. He does not command the roots every hour. He plants, and he trusts the law of growth. His labor is in the planting. His wisdom is in the waiting. His faith is in his rest. If the farmer behaved as many people pray, he would destroy his own harvest. Imagine him planting at dawn, then by noon digging up the seed, because no stalk has appeared, then planting again, then digging again by evening in discouragement. what would happen? He would call the soil barren, when in truth it was his impatience that prevented growth. So it is with man and his imaginal acts. He plants in consciousness, then through worry, complaint, and obsessive repetition, he uproots what he has planted, and then wonders why no harvest appears. Learn from the farmer. Plant once, in faith. Water with gratitude. Protect the field from the weeds of contradiction, and then rest. There is a silence after command that is sacred. I want you to feel the dignity of this. When you have spoken from the fulfilled state, when word and feeling have become one, let silence follow. Do not rush to fill the air. Do not hurry to explain it to others. Do not seek immediate confirmation. The silence is not emptiness. It is gestation. It is the womb of fulfillment. In that silence, the unseen begins to take shape. I have often found that after a true decree, the soul itself desires quiet. It does not wish to chatter. It does not wish to argue. It does not wish to rehearse the old story. A calm comes, and with it a kind of inward modesty, as though something holy has taken place and should not be handled carelessly. Guard that mood. It is the fragrance of faith. Silence after command does not mean you never speak again. It means you do not speak against what you have spoken. You do not use the tongue to bless in 1 hour and curse in the next. You do not say, I am free at night and nothing ever changes for me in the morning. You do not speak the end inwardly and then narrate the problem outwardly all day long. That is not silence. That is contradiction. And contradiction delays what rest would hasten. If circumstances arise that seem to deny your decree, answer them with poise. You need not argue with appearances. You need not pretend not to see them. Simply refuse to grant them final authority. See them as the fading echo of yesterday's state. Let your response be brief, inwardly firm, and outwardly calm. This is not the end. I have already spoken. Then return to peace. Every such moment strengthens the Sabbath within you. Now let me speak of gratitude, for gratitude belongs to the Sabbath as naturally as harvest belongs to seed. Gratitude before evidence is one of the surest signs that faith has matured. Anyone can be thankful after the result appears. The senses rejoice easily when they are satisfied. But to give thanks before evidence, to feel appreciation while the world still looks unchanged, this reveals that you have accepted the unseen as real, and that acceptance is creation. I do not mean forced gratitude, where one repeats, thank you, while inwardly trembling. I mean the gentle, sincere thankfulness that arises when you know the matter has passed into law. It may be no more than a quiet breath and a whispered, thank you. It may be a soft smile in the dark before sleep. It may be a feeling of relief so subtle that no one but you could name it. Yet this gratitude has immense power, because it confirms completion. When I have truly entered the Sabbath, gratitude appears of itself. I do not have to command it. It flows naturally from certainty. It says, I give thanks not because I have seen the thing, but because I know the law. It says, I do not wait for proof to believe, I believe. And so proof must follow. It says, the seed is in the ground, and I honor the harvest before it rises. There is deep wisdom in this, especially for those who listen in the night while the body grows quiet and the mind begins to loosen its grip. The hour before sleep is not for wrestling with life. It is not for counting fears. It is not for rehearsing unpaid balances, old humiliations, and possible disasters. To sleep in worry is to sow worry. To sleep in complaint is to plant complaint. But to sleep in gratitude, even before the evidence, is to enter the Sabbath and give your subconscious a noble impression to objectify. If you would know whether you are resting in faith, observe the quality of your nights. Do you go to sleep trying to force tomorrow into being? Or do you enter sleep as one who has already placed the matter in the hands of law? Do you carry tension into the pillow or thanksgiving? Do you drift off with mental argument or with inward completion? The state in which you sleep is not a small thing. It is the final seal upon the day's consciousness. Many ask me, should I repeat the statement all night? No. If repetition helps you enter the state, Use it gently, but do not make a machine of the soul. The purpose is not endless utterance. The purpose is assumption. When the feeling of fulfillment has come, when gratitude has softened you, when peace has descended, stop. Let sleep take you in that mood. That is enough. In fact, that is more than enough. It is the very law in operation. I must say this plainly, because so many are trapped in spiritual exhaustion. You do not earn manifestation by overworking the inner act. You do not impress the subconscious by frantic effort. You impress it by natural acceptance. The subconscious is not persuaded by strain. It is impressed by feeling. And the clearest sign of accepted feeling is rest. Think again of the farmer. His rest is not laziness. He still rises, still tends what must be tended, still goes about his days. But inwardly he is not at war with the field. He is not doubting the principle of growth, because the fruit is not yet visible. He lives in cooperation with law, so too must you. Go about your day. Attend to what is before you. Pay what can be paid. Answer letters, speak with others, fulfill your ordinary duties, but inwardly remain in the Sabbath. Let your actions be practical, but let your state be fulfilled. This is how effort is transformed. I am not asking you to become passive in life. I am asking you to cease mental struggle. There is a great difference. A man in faith may act, but he does not act from panic. He may make a phone call, but not as a beggar inwardly. He may handle accounts, but not as one doomed. He may meet responsibilities, but he does so from the state of one already supported. In this way, the outer actions become part of the bridge of incidents, not attempts to replace the law. The silence after command, the gratitude before evidence, the refusal to obsess, the willingness to sleep in peace. These are not little refinements. They are the very body of faith. Without them, one may have inspiration, but no stability. With them, even a simple imaginal act becomes tremendously fruitful. I have known people who received more from one quiet, faithful assumption than others received from years of restless spiritual striving. Why? Because the former entered the Sabbath. They accepted, they rested, they gave thanks, before they could point to any proof. And because they did not interfere with the seed, it grew. So if tonight, after hearing these words, you feel tempted to do more inwardly out of fear, stop and remember, the highest act after creation is rest. Speak your word. Feel it real. Let the old momentum die. And in that calm fidelity, you will discover that what seemed like resistance was only the final trembling of a world that no longer belongs to you. And now, if you remain faithful through that interval, if you do not abandon your assumption, when appearances seem to delay, something very lovely begins to happen. The world starts to whisper back to you. It does not usually begin with thunder. It begins softly, almost shyly, with little movements that seem ordinary to the careless mind and miraculous only to the one who has learned to see. A coincidence here, a word overheard there, a letter arriving at an unexpected hour, a small refund from a place you had forgotten, a man remembering a promise, a woman returning what was owed, a call that comes precisely on the day it is needed. These things begin to appear. And if you are watchful in the right way, not anxious, not hunting, but quietly aware, you will recognize them as the first fruits of the state you have assumed. I tell you, these signs are not to be worshipped, and they are not to be chased. They are not the cause. They are the echo. They are the outer world beginning to confess what you have already accepted inwardly. And if you understand this, you will meet them properly. Most people, when the first sign appears, react in the old way. They gasp, they shout, they say, "I cannot believe it." But listen carefully to the spirit of that statement. I cannot believe it. Even in the moment of blessing, they announce disbelief. They receive the sign, yet they place astonishment between themselves and the law, as though grace were an exception instead of order. I ask you to learn a finer way. When the coincidence comes, do not tremble as though the universe has broken its own rules to favor you for one day. When the refund comes, Do not behave as though some random mercy has dropped from the sky without cause. When the unexpected call comes, do not receive it as magic. Receive it as law. Receive it as natural. Receive it as the world doing what it must do when consciousness has changed. There is a dignity in this recognition, a quiet mastery. I remember telling students who would come to me excited by the first movements, do not be surprised that the law works. Be grateful. Surprise still contains distance. Gratitude contains union. Surprise says, something outside me has done something unusual. Gratitude says, I recognize my own deeper being made visible. That is a very different posture. So when the signs begin, and they will begin in one form or another if you remain faithful, meet them with a soft and inward thank you. Not because you are flattering some distant power, but because gratitude is the natural fragrance of recognition. You are recognizing divine order. You are recognizing the bridge of incidents. You are recognizing that the seed is sprouting in its own appointed way. Let us speak plainly of these signs, for many who listen while drowsy and drifting into sleep will wake and see them, and be tempted to miss them. You may receive a small reimbursement for an overpayment you had forgotten. Perhaps a clerk made an error months ago, and now the adjustment appears. To the world, this is administration. To the awakened imagination, it is part of the bridge. You need not make it mystical. You need only see it rightly. The world of facts is the garment worn by the law. The law rarely announces itself. It simply moves through natural channels. You may receive an unexpected call from someone you have not heard from in years, and the conversation opens a door, restores confidence, offers assistance, presents a position, settles a misunderstanding, or reminds another of something due to you. Again, the untrained mind says, what luck! But the law-trained mind says, of course. The state I entered is now arranging its own witnesses. You may notice coincidences so exact they feel almost intimate, as though life itself were leaning close and whispering, yes, continue. A phrase you imagined in silence may be spoken aloud by another. A word you repeated inwardly before sleep may appear in a letter, a sermon, a conversation, or an ordinary exchange in the street. These are not accidents. They are reflections. They are the world beginning to mirror not only your outcomes, but your very inner tone. Let silence follow. Give thanks softly. Then sleep as one who has planted well. If doubts rise, do not wrestle them to the floor. Return gently to the feeling of completion and let rest reappear. If the senses demand proof, answer them kindly. The farmer does not demand fruit the hour after planting. If old habits call for repetition without feeling, refuse the compulsion and choose one sincere breath of gratitude instead. That breath, if genuine, is worth more than 1,000 anxious words. Faith is rest. Let that sentence settle in you until it becomes natural. For when you truly understand it, you will cease exhausting yourself in the name of spiritual work, and you will begin to create with the quiet authority of one who knows that the law is sure. And from that rest, the harvest comes. Now, if you have truly entered that rest, there comes a natural next step, and it is this: you must begin to live from the end. I do not mean that you must pretend before men. I do not mean theatrical behavior, nor reckless display, nor the foolish denial of present facts. I mean something far deeper and far more powerful. I mean that inwardly and outwardly, in tone, in posture, in reaction, in the quality of your daily movements, you begin to embody the state of the wish fulfilled. You cease living as one who is waiting to be provided for, and you begin living as one who is already provided for. You cease moving through the day as a debtor in consciousness, and you begin moving through the day as a free man in consciousness. This is what I mean by living from the end. Many can imagine for a few moments in the night and even feel relief for a little while. Yet in the morning they return at once to the old self. They rise and dress as the worried one. They speak as the pressured one. They open the post as the fearful one. They pay a bill as the diminished one. They look at every expense as though life were taking something from them. and then they wonder why the old state remains. It remains because though they touched the new state in imagination, they did not inhabit it in life. Creation responds to state, not to isolated moments alone. The imaginal act plants the seed. Yes. The Sabbath protects it. Yes. But daily life reveals whether you are nourishing the seed with congruent feeling or starving it with contradiction. To live from the end is to let your ordinary actions become expressions of your new assumption. You ask me, how shall I do this when the world still looks the same? And I tell you, precisely then. If you wait for the world to change before you change your manner of being, you are living from effect, not cause. You are asking the mirror to smile first. But the law does not work that way. You must smile first within yourself. You must assume the feeling first, then the reflection follows. To live as provided for does not mean you spend foolishly to prove faith. It means you cease spending emotionally from fear. There is a profound difference. A person may have little and yet move in abundance, and another may have much and yet live in poverty of consciousness. Poverty of consciousness is not measured by coins, but by fear. Abundance of consciousness is not measured by numbers, but by trust, ease, and inward sufficiency. I have seen men clutch every small expense, as though each one were a personal wound, and in that very clutching, they affirmed scarcity again and again. They did not merely pay for things, they suffered each payment. Their hands released money, but their minds cried loss. They called this prudence, but inwardly it was fear, and the law, being impersonal, answered fear with more conditions to fear. Then I have seen others, even in narrow circumstances, pay what was due with a strange nobility and inward poise. They were not careless, they were not extravagant, but they were not enslaved. They did not feel diminished by circulation. They understood, perhaps dimly at first, that supply is a state before it is a sum. They gave from a feeling of order, and life answered that order. This is why I say to you, pay from abundance in consciousness, even before abundance is fully visible in form. If a bill must be paid, do not pay it as one being drained. Pay it as one participating in flow. Pay it as one who trusts circulation. Pay it as one who knows, I am sustained. The outer act may look the same to any observer, but the inner act is entirely different, and it is the inner act that creates. When you open your post, do not brace yourself inwardly as though every envelope were an enemy. Open it from freedom. Say within yourself, I walk in divine order. All things move in my favor. If an obligation appears, do not let your imagination rush to catastrophe. That rush is the old man. See the paper. Yes. Handle the fact. Yes. But remain in your chosen state. The paper is not your master. Your consciousness is the cause. When you enter a shop, do not walk in as one begging life for permission to live. Walk in as one already supported by the unseen source. Even if you purchase only what is necessary, let the state be abundance. Let the feeling be, I am cared for. It is this feeling, repeated through daily life, that stabilizes the new state until it becomes natural. And this matter of walking from freedom is more literal than most realize. The body reveals the state long before the lips do. A man in fear hurries even when there is no need. He tightens his jaw. He contracts his breath. He lives as though chased. A man in freedom may move quickly when required, but inwardly he is not driven. His breath is deeper. His gaze is steadier. His step carries less conflict. The body, too, can be educated into the feeling of the wish fulfilled. There were times when I deliberately altered nothing in my outer circumstances, for the moment, and yet I changed how I moved through them. I would walk the same streets, meet the same people, see the same accounts, and yet inwardly I would carry myself as one whose matter was already settled. I did not do this to deceive anyone. I did it because I had learned that consciousness precedes fact. I was not pretending to be free. I was practicing freedom in consciousness until the world mirrored it. At first, this may feel subtle. The old reactions may still try to rise. You may find fear catching in the chest when a demand appears. If so, do not condemn yourself. Pause. Breathe. Return. Ask yourself quietly, if I were already fully provided for, how would I meet this moment? Then meet it that way. That question alone can shift you from reaction to creation. I remember a woman who came to one of my lectures, burdened not merely by debt, but by the emotional habit of debt. She was diligent, honest, and hardworking. Yet she lived in constant inward contraction. She said to me, in effect, no matter what comes in, it disappears. I pay and pay, and I feel poorer each time. Her words revealed the state. She was not simply paying bills, she was performing a ritual of loss. Every payment was inwardly accompanied by fear, resentment, and depletion. And because feeling is the secret, she was sowing more of the same every month. I asked her, tell me what you feel when you write a check. She looked at me with surprise, for she had never considered that the feeling mattered. She spoke only of figures, dates, amounts due. But I persisted, and at last she admitted, I feel panic. I feel as if something is being taken from me and nothing is coming back. There was the cause, not in the paper, not in the account, but in the state. I told her, then change the state from which you pay. Do not wait until you have more. Begin now. When you pay, bless the payment. Feel that you are participating in circulation, not loss. Feel that supply is with you, not leaving you. Write each check as though you are a woman of means, not because the world sees it yet, but because consciousness must first wear the form it intends the world to reflect. She resisted at first, as many do, because the senses argue so loudly. How can I feel rich while paying what I scarcely have? She asked. And I said, I did not ask you to feel rich because of the amount in hand. I asked you to feel supplied because of the source within. The amount is shadow, the source is substance. She began the practice. Not perfectly at first, but sincerely. Each time she paid an obligation, she paused before signing. She steadied her breath. She withdrew attention from fear. She said inwardly, I am supplied. I give from order. What goes forth returns multiplied in ways I need not dictate. She did not say this mechanically. She worked to feel it, even if only for a few moments. She also changed the manner in which she spoke about money. She stopped saying, there is never enough. She stopped announcing panic as though it were truth. She did not deny facts. She ceased worshipping them. Within a short time, far sooner than she expected, something moved in the outer world. Her employer, without warning, awarded her a bonus. Not a token gesture, but a substantial sum, enough to alter her immediate condition and ease the very pressure that had driven her into fear month after month. She came back astonished at the timing. But what struck me most was not the bonus itself. It was her face. The fear had softened. The tension that had lived around her mouth and eyes had diminished. She said, in substance, for the first time, I paid my obligations without feeling robbed by life. And I told her, that was the true change. The bonus merely followed. Do you see the law? The outer event was important. Yes, but it was not the first miracle. The first miracle was emotional. She ceased paying from fear and began paying from abundance in consciousness. She ceased walking as the pursued and began walking as the provided for. The world then rearranged itself to match the new state. This is what I mean by living from the end. It is not dramatic. It is not always visible to others at once. It is often expressed in very simple ways, in how you open a letter, how you sign your name, how you speak to a creditor, how you hold your body while looking at your accounts, how you bless what goes out, how you refuse to inwardly collapse when appearances challenge you. These are not small things. They are the channels through which state becomes fact. You must also learn to walk from freedom before you can point to complete evidence of freedom. If you wait until every account is settled before you allow yourself inward peace, then you have made peace the reward of circumstances instead of the cause of their transformation. Let peace be your cause. Let freedom be your state first. Then the settlements, Adjustments, opportunities, and bridges of incident will come in their appointed sequence. I often say that the bridge of incidents unfolds naturally once the end is assumed, but many fail to recognize their own bridge because they expect magic in one form only. They think living from the end means all pressures vanish in an instant, and every road becomes visibly smooth. Sometimes it happens so swiftly it astonishes you. But often the law moves through ordinary channels, through a conversation, a letter, a delayed payment, an unexpected introduction, a changed attitude in someone else, a new opportunity, an idea that arrives in stillness. If you are living from the end, you meet each event from the fulfilled state and allow it to be part of the bridge. This means you stop interpreting every delay as denial. A free man in consciousness does not panic at the first appearance of contradiction. He remains loyal to the end. He says, "This too may serve." He pays what can be paid with dignity. He speaks calmly. He does not return to the language of bondage. He keeps his inner posture, and because he keeps the state keeps creating. There is also a generosity of spirit that belongs to one living from the end. I do not mean careless giving to impress others. I mean the inward generosity that refuses the cramped feeling of not enough for me. It is possible to be prudent and still inwardly abundant. It is possible to be disciplined and still feel rich in spirit. In fact, true prudence arising from abundance feels entirely different from caution arising from fear. One is clear and orderly, the other is tense and defensive. Learn to feel the difference. When you live from the end, even your language changes. Not because you force yourself into pious phrases, but because the old tone no longer feels natural. You no longer say, "Everything is against me," because that statement feels foreign to the state you now occupy. You no longer narrate your life as a siege. You may say, if needed, "This matter is being resolved." You may say, "All is moving in order." You may say, "I am provided for." And you say it not as ornament, but as fact in consciousness. Carry this into your day in practical ways. When paying an obligation, bless it. When receiving an account, remain still before reacting. When speaking of your affairs, refuse melodrama. When walking, breathe as one already relieved. When lying down to sleep, let the final mood be completion, not calculation. When waking, resume the state before the world has had a chance to suggest the old one to you. In this way, living from the end becomes not a technique but a way of being. And let me remind you again, because it is so important, living from the end is not pretending that common sense does not exist. You may still arrange payments, you may still work, you may still negotiate, write letters, seek opportunities, and perform all manner of practical acts. But do them from the state of being supported, not abandoned. Do them from the state of freedom, not bondage. The same action performed from a different state produces a different world. I have watched this law work too many times to doubt it. The man who imagines freedom, but continues to live emotionally as a prisoner, delays himself. The woman who assumes provision and then meets life from provision accelerates the bridge. The one who pays from fear reinforces fear. The one who pays from abundance in consciousness invites abundance in form. It is law, simple and exact. So as you continue, remember this: do not merely visit the fulfilled state in imagination and then abandon it at dawn. Wear it, walk in it, pay from it, speak from it, breathe from it. Let it govern the most ordinary moments. For the ordinary moments are precisely where states become flesh. If you do this faithfully, the world will begin to reflect your new assumption in ways both subtle and striking. Relief will appear where there was pressure. Openings will appear where there were walls. Supply will move through channels you could not have arranged by force. And when it does, you will understand more deeply than before that the true work was never in manipulating circumstance. The true work was in becoming, inwardly, the one for whom the desired world is already natural. Live from the end, and the end will come to meet you. Now there is something I must tell you. and I tell it to you with great tenderness, because many who begin well abandon the work at precisely this stage. They imagine rightly, they feel the relief, they speak the word, they even enter rest for a little while. And then the world appears to answer them with contradiction. A new demand appears, a delay lengthens, a circumstance seems to harden. And because they do not understand this movement, they assume they have failed. But they have not failed. They are often standing at the very threshold of fulfillment. What they call resistance is, in truth, the momentum of the old state. It is the lingering movement of a former assumption, still spending itself in time. The world is not rejecting your new word. It is releasing your old one. That is an entirely different thing. And if you understand this, you will stop fearing appearances and begin reading them correctly. When a man has lived long in the feeling of lack, debt, pressure, delay, or humiliation, that state acquires momentum in the world of facts. It has movement, it has pattern, it has habit, it has, if I may use the phrase, a kind of inertia. Then one night the man truly changes within himself. He assumes freedom. He speaks from the end. He feels completion. In the unseen, the cause has changed. But in the seen, the former motion may continue for a little while, just as a wheel continues to turn after the driving force has been withdrawn. Most men see the turning wheel and panic. They say, "Nothing has changed." But the wise man knows the power source has changed. He understands that what he witnesses may simply be the final movement of an old mechanism no longer being fed by his belief. This is why I say to you, do not judge the truth of your imaginal act too quickly, by the first report of the senses. The senses report echoes. Imagination creates causes. If you return to fear because of the echo, you feed the old cause again. But if you remain faithful to the new state, the old momentum must exhaust itself. Let me give you an image I have often used in my own understanding. Imagine a great ship at sea. It has been traveling for a long while in one direction. Its mass is enormous, its momentum strong. Then the captain turns the wheel. The command is real, the intention is real, the direction has been changed in cause. But the ship does not pivot like a toy in a basin. It continues forward for a time, still bearing the visible consequences of its former course, while the new direction gradually takes hold in full expression. If a passenger, ignorant of navigation, looked only at the surface in that first moment, he might cry, "The captain's command has failed. We are still moving the old way." Yet the captain knows better. The turning has already occurred where it matters. The visible line of travel will soon reveal what has already been decided at the helm. You are that captain. Your consciousness is the helm. The outer world is the ship's visible course. When you assume a new state, do not become like the frightened passenger who judges too soon. Become the captain. Hold the wheel, keep the course inwardly. Let the old momentum spend itself. The world will show the turn in due season. I have seen this so many times that I can tell you plainly, what appears as resistance is often the death of the previous assumption. It is the old state losing authority, and as it loses authority, it may appear to flare for a moment. The old fear rises, not because it is stronger, but because it is being displaced. The old circumstance presses, not because it is final, but because it is passing through its last movements. If you mistake this for failure, and return emotionally to the old state, you breathe life back into what was already dying. So when the world appears to push back, do not answer with panic, answer with understanding. Say inwardly, if you must say anything at all, "This is the old momentum. I remain in the new state." Those few words, spoken with calm conviction, can save months of unnecessary struggle because they prevent you from abandoning your own seed at the first shadow. There is another image that may help you, and it is the image of the mirror. I have told you before that the world is yourself pushed out, and this is no poetic phrase. It is law. But understand the law with subtlety. When you stand before a mirror and alter your expression, the reflection follows. Yet, in lived experience, especially in the larger mirror of time and events, There may appear to be a delay between the inward shift and the outer conformity. Men see the delay and call it contradiction. It is not contradiction. It is not contradiction. It is interval. Suppose you have frowned inwardly for years, and the world has faithfully mirrored the frown in forms of pressure, delay, debt, and disappointment. Then at last you change. You smile inwardly. You assume freedom. You feel relief before evidence. In that moment, the mirror must change because the cause has changed. But if old images still seem to linger for a little while, do not be deceived into frowning again. If you do, you renew the very thing you were trying to transcend. Remain still. Keep the new expression. The mirror cannot do otherwise than catch up. This apparent mirror delay is where many lose heart. They imagined a magical world in which every inner act is instantly reflected without sequence. But this world of Caesar, this world of facts, numbers, letters, offices, timetables, and human interactions, often unfolds through sequence. The law is still perfect. The sequence is part of the bridge. The delay is not denial. It is the mirror catching up to the face you are now wearing in consciousness. I remember times in my own experience when, after a clear imaginal act and true inner relief, circumstances seemed for a brief interval to contradict me. A letter would arrive, a request would come, a condition would seem to tighten. In earlier years, I might have taken this as proof that I had done it wrongly. But later, understanding the law, I learned to smile at these appearances. I would say, in effect, you are only yesterday's news. You have no creative authority. And I would continue in the feeling of fulfillment. Again and again, the outer world then rearranged itself, not by my force, but by law. Adjustments came. Delays resolved. What had seemed threatening was reinterpreted, postponed, reduced, reversed, or transformed into a bridge I could not have designed. Had I panicked at the first appearance, I would have re-entered the old state and delayed the harvest. By remaining faithful, I allowed the old assumption to die. And let me say this as gently as I can: the old state does not die quietly in every case. If you have long identified with burden, then freedom may feel unfamiliar at first. The old man within you may attempt to reclaim his throne. He may whisper, "Be realistic, protect yourself, expect disappointment, prepare for the worst." He may even try to sound wise, but he is only habit speaking. He is the voice of momentum, not the voice of truth. Do not hate him. Do not wrestle with him endlessly. Simply do not re-enthrone him. Notice the voice. Bless it if you like. Then return to your chosen state. Return to the feeling of already being provided for. Return to the breath of relief. Return to the quiet conviction that the word has been spoken and cannot return void. This gentle return, repeated as needed, is persistence without strain. It is not violent effort. It is loyal remembrance. If the world sends another seeming contradiction, let it come. Meet it from the end. If the account appears low, do not build an inner cathedral to fear around it. Handle what must be handled, and remain inwardly free. If someone speaks doubt into your ear, do not borrow their state. Let them speak from their mirror. You remain in yours. If a delay occurs, do not interpret it as loss. It may be rearrangement. It may be protection. It may be the unseen fitting pieces together beyond the reach of your present sight. The great error is not that resistance appears. The great error is to interpret resistance as final. Nothing in the outer world is final unless you finalize it again in consciousness. The appearance has no creative power of its own. Your acceptance or rejection of it in feeling is what matters. This is why I say resistance is often the death of the previous assumption. The old structure trembles because a new foundation has been laid. The old story complains because you have stopped narrating it. The old momentum surges because the helm has turned. The mirror lags because the face has changed. None of this is failure. It is transition. And if you can understand transition, you will not abandon yourself in the middle of transformation. There is a curious moment in this process when the soul matures. It is the moment you cease demanding immediate sensory reassurance and begin trusting the law itself. You say, not with arrogance, but with deep, quiet certainty, I know what I have done in imagination. I know what I have felt. I know who I am being now. Therefore, I do not fear appearances. When this maturity appears in you, the world loses much of its power to frighten. You begin to read life differently. A challenge no longer means I am failing. It means the old state is spending itself. A delay no longer means I am denied. It means the bridge is still unfolding. An unexpected pressure no longer means the law does not work. It means I am being tempted to return to an old assumption. And because you understand the temptation, you need not yield to it. Stand firm in gentleness. That is the key. Not rigid, not defiant, not anxious, not loudly performative. Gentle, quietly faithful, quietly clear, quietly anchored. The law does not require emotional drama from you. It requires fidelity to state. If you remain in the new state while the old momentum dies, you will one day look back and realize that what frightened you was never truly resistance at all. It was the rearrangement itself. It was the visible world adjusting to an invisible command. It was the ship completing its turn. It was the mirror catching up. It was yesterday releasing its hold so that today's assumption could become tomorrow's fact. So when you meet this stage, and you likely will remember what I have told you tonight, do not abandon the process, because the old world echoes once more. Do not take the echo as a verdict. Do not surrender your new state to the first contradiction. Hold the helm, keep the expression. And yet, let me warn you with love. Do not become a collector of signs. Do not sit all day measuring, counting, and interpreting every little thing, for that too can become another form of strain. You are not to live as a nervous fortune teller peering into every shadow for proof. You are to live as one who knows the law, and therefore welcomes signs without depending upon them. Signs are companions, not masters. They are confirmations, not foundations. Your foundation is the state itself. If no sign appears today, remain as faithful as if 10 had appeared. If a sign appears, remain as calm as if none were necessary. This balance is wisdom. But when they do come, and they often come in clusters once movement begins, let gratitude deepen rather than excitement scatter you. Quiet gratitude stabilizes the state. It says to the subconscious, yes, this is natural. This is mine, by right of consciousness. I receive it without strain. And because the subconscious loves consistency, this calm acceptance often opens the way for larger fulfillments to follow. I have seen men delay their own harvest by treating every small sign as if it were a lottery miracle. They would run about telling the old story with new enthusiasm. You won't believe what happened. And though their joy was sincere, they reintroduced disbelief and emotional excess where simple gratitude would have served them better. Their attention shifted from being to spectacle, from law to surprise, from calm possession to nervous excitement. Excitement is not wrong, but calm gratitude is stronger. Calm gratitude says, this is the beginning of what I have already accepted. It does not clutch the sign. It blesses it and lets it pass into the stream of fulfillment. It does not demand that every sign look dramatic. It knows that some of the most powerful bridges begin in the smallest adjustments. A correction in an account, a delayed fee waived, a kind word from the right person, a door not closed when it might have been, a chance meeting at a precise hour. These are not small to the law. They are threads, and the threads become a garment. There is another reason I ask you never to be surprised. Surprise often belongs to the old self. The old self lived in the state of things rarely work in my favor. Therefore, when favor appears, he is shocked. But if you have assumed the state of one who is provided for, helped, guided, and supported, then favor is no longer shocking. It is expected, not in arrogance, but in harmony. You are not expecting people to serve your vanity. You are expecting life to mirror your state. That is natural. That is lawful. So when a refund comes, receive it as natural. When a call comes, receive it as natural. When a coincidence appears, receive it as natural. Do not force yourself into dullness, but do train yourself into recognition. Smile softly and say, yes, say thank you, say, this too belongs to the bridge. In that simple manner, you remain in the fulfilled state while the outer world continues to organize around it. I once knew a woman who had begun at last to practice this with sincerity. In former days, every little improvement made her wildly hopeful, and every little delay crushed her. She lived emotionally at the mercy of signs. One week she would rejoice, the next week she would despair. I told her, you are still allowing the outer world to define the inner. Reverse it. She began to understand. When a small sum was returned to her unexpectedly, she did not cry out in disbelief. She sat quietly for a moment, placed the paper in her hand, and whispered, thank you. More accurately, she whispered it to the deep self within, to the law itself, to the order she was learning to trust. A few days later, a man called regarding a matter she thought closed. That call led to a restoration of income she had not foreseen. Again, she answered not with panic, not with astonishment, but with grateful composure. Yes, she said to me later, I am beginning to feel that these things are not interruptions, but evidence that a hidden order is unfolding. That is exactly the feeling. And as gratitude becomes your natural response, your heart changes. You cease to live in emotional whiplash. You are no longer thrown high by one sign and cast low by one delay. You become steady. And because you become steady, the manifestations themselves often become steadier. For the law reflects not merely your desire, but your dominant emotional posture toward life. Gratitude is a posture of completion. It implies receipt. It implies trust. It implies that something has already been given, even if the visible form is still arriving in stages. When you say thank you, before the full harvest, you are not pretending. You are acknowledging the unseen movement that the senses have not yet finished reporting. This is why gratitude is so powerful in this stage. It keeps the door open without strain. It welcomes without grasping. It confirms without demanding. It lets the bridge unfold naturally. And above all, it protects you from the old habit of disbelief. So if tomorrow you notice a coincidence, bless it. If you receive a refund, bless it. If an unexpected call comes, bless it. If a stranger says precisely what you needed to hear, bless it. If a delay resolves in your favor, bless it. And do not ask, how strange is this? Ask instead, how natural that the world should begin to echo the state I have entered. That question alone can transform your entire journey, because it moves you from superstition into understanding. And as the signs increase, as gratitude steadies your heart, you will feel something else begin to dawn. A quiet confidence that no longer needs frequent reassurance. You will still appreciate the signs, but you will no longer live by them. You will recognize them, thank them, and continue walking. For the true fulfillment is not in collecting evidence, but in becoming the one for whom such evidence is natural. When that happens, you are no longer merely practicing the law. You are living in it. You are moving through the world as one who expects order, expects provision, expects harmony, not because life owes you a special exception, but because consciousness, rightly directed, must externalize itself. And then even the smallest coincidence becomes what it truly is, not a surprise, but a polite knock from the invisible, announcing that what you accepted in silence is now approaching in form. And now we come to the point at which many begin well and yet turn back too soon. They have spoken the word. They have felt it. They have entered rest for a night, perhaps for several days. They have even seen the first signs and tasted the sweetness of gratitude. But then the interval lengthens, or appearances waver, and the old mind begins its quiet interrogation. Was it real? Did I truly impress the subconscious? Have I done enough? What if I must begin again? And in that questioning, they are tempted to leave the state before it has fully flowered. So listen to me very carefully now, and let this sink into you, especially if you hear these words while the body is soft and the mind is drifting towards sleep. The law does not fail because time passes. The law is not weakened because the senses have not yet caught up. The unseen does not become less real, merely because the seen is delayed. If anything, this interval is where faith becomes pure. Faith beyond evidence is not blind belief in some distant power. It is loyalty to what you have already experienced inwardly. It is the refusal to betray your own imaginal act simply because the world of Caesar has not yet rewritten its records. It is loyalty to the unseen reality you accepted as true in the depth of your being. And I tell you that loyalty is creative. It is not passive endurance. It is active agreement with the fulfilled state. When I speak of persistence, I do not mean strain. I do not mean repeating a phrase 1,000 times from fear that the first utterance was not enough. I do not mean pacing the room and forcing conviction. That is not persistence. That is anxiety wearing the mask of discipline. True persistence is much gentler and far more powerful. It is the steady returning of the mind to the chosen state whenever it wanders. It is the quiet refusal to move out of the end. It is the inward posture of one who has decided, I have seen it, I have felt it, and I remain faithful to it. In this world, the senses will often present a report that contradicts what you have claimed. You may still see the bill. You may still hear the demand. You may still feel a momentary tremor in the body. Do not condemn yourself for that tremor. The body has memory. The nervous system has habits. The old state may still echo for a little while. But you are not called to be perfect in sensation. You are called to be faithful in assumption. That is the distinction that frees a man. I have known many who thought they had failed because fear visited them after they had prayed. But fear visiting you is not failure. Fear ruling you is failure. Let it knock, but do not give it the chair at the center of your house. Let the old thought rise, and then answer it as one who remembers. Do not wrestle with it for hours. Do not build a sermon against it. Simply return. Simply re-enter. Simply say within yourself, no, I know what I accepted. I know what I felt. I know what is true. That return is persistence. That return is faith in practice. And sometimes in the middle of the day, when appearances feel loud and the world presses upon you, you may need to do something very simple and very holy. Whisper the command again, not as a beggar repeating a request, not as one trying to persuade a reluctant heaven, but as one reminding himself of what he has already decreed. A soft, inward whisper, a gentle recollection, a return to the tone of completion. If your command is, I am free, whisper it again, not in panic, but in recognition. If your word is, it is finished, whisper it again, not to make it happen, but because it remains true. If the 7 words you heard in the night have become a living flame within you, whisper them again when the old darkness tries to gather. The whisper, rightly used, is not repetition from fear. It is loyalty to the unseen. There is great power in the whisper because it reveals your state. Anyone can shout in desperation. Few can whisper in certainty. The whisper carries the weight of knowing. It is the tone of one who does not need to prove. When I say speak again, I do not mean return to labor. I mean return to remembrance. There is a vast difference. I learned this not from theory, but from necessity. There were periods in my own life when the bridge of incidents seemed slow to the senses, though I had done the work inwardly and knew the law. In those intervals, I discovered that the mind, left unattended, drifts toward old explanations. It begins to count, compare, and calculate. It searches for evidence and calls that prudence. It rehearses possibilities and calls that preparation. But beneath it all is often the old fear asking to be believed again. So I would pause, sometimes in a chair, sometimes walking, sometimes at night just before sleep. And I would not argue with the world. I would whisper one sentence from the end. Just one, spoken inwardly with feeling. A simple return. It is done. Or, I am sustained. Or, I am free. And I would feel the body soften, as though I had stepped out of a noisy street into a quiet room. The outer facts had not yet changed in that instant, but I had changed in that instant, and that is the only change that matters at the level of cause. This is what I want for you as you listen in the night. I do not want you exhausting yourself trying to hold a state by force. I want you learning the rhythm of return. The state may seem to fade during the day. Return, the world may tempt you with old evidence. Return, the mind may ask for proof. Return. This returning, done without violence, builds a kind of inner nobility. It teaches the subconscious what you mean. It tells your deeper being, this is the house I live in now. This is the name I answer to now. This is the state I choose. And because the subconscious is faithful, it will objectify what you persist in occupying. Loyalty to the unseen is one of the purest forms of devotion. Men think devotion means rituals, postures, long recitations. But the highest devotion is to remain true to the vision you have accepted in imagination when the senses still deny it. That is worship in spirit. That is prayer without ceasing. It is not endless words. It is sustained identity. You remain the man who is free. You remain the woman who is provided for. You remain the one whose burden has already lifted. You remain inwardly what you would like to be outwardly, and time must eventually reveal your fidelity. I want you to understand something very tender and very important. Persistence is not hardness. It is love. It is love for the unseen self you have chosen. It is love for the divine possibility already alive in you. It is love for truth before proof. When you persist, you are not fighting the world. You are caring for a seed. You are protecting a flame from unnecessary wind. You are holding gently but firmly to what you know. The world calls this stubbornness when it does not understand it. I call it faithfulness. A farmer does not dig up the field every morning to ask if the seed still believes in growth. He remains loyal to the process because he understands the nature of seed and soil. He waters, he watches, and he waits without panic. And if a cold morning comes, he does not declare the harvest dead. He knows seasons move. He knows life works in silence before it shows itself in form. So too with your imaginal act. If a day comes when nothing appears to move, do not name that day failure. Name it gestation. Name it hidden movement. Name it a day in which the unseen remains unseen, but no less active. And if the pressure of the old world rises sharply, whisper the command again. You need not withdraw from life to do this. You can do it while standing in a queue. You can do it as you walk to work. You can do it before opening a letter. You can do it lying in the dark with half-closed eyes while sleep approaches. The whisper is your bridge back to yourself. It recalls the feeling. It restores the arrangement of consciousness. It turns the heart from evidence to reality. Sometimes the whisper will come with immediate relief. At other times you may whisper it and still feel the body unsettled. Do not be disturbed by that. Keep the whisper gentle. Let it be like placing a hand upon your own shoulder. You are not trying to conquer yourself. You are teaching yourself. You are reminding yourself. You are reclaiming your seat at the center of being. If you persist in this way, something remarkable begins to occur. The command you once repeated intentionally becomes almost self-sustaining. It begins to live in you. It appears unbidden in moments when you would formerly have worried. The heart starts to answer before the mind can panic. A kind of inner habit is formed, but this time it is a habit of faith. The old automatic fear is gradually replaced by automatic remembrance. That is the fruit of persistence. Then, when the next challenge comes, and there will always be new levels, new desires, new opportunities to apply the law, you will not feel as helpless as before. You will know the way back. You will know how to return to the end. You will know how to whisper the command and rest in it without fanfare. You will know what it means to be loyal to the unseen. And that knowledge, born of practice, gives a man a quiet authority no outer circumstance can easily shake. I say this especially for the one who has grown tired, for the one who says, I have believed, yet the visible still lingers in the old shape. Do not abandon the state because the mirror is slow. Do not betray the unseen because the seen is late. Hold your inner position. If needed, reduce everything to one soft sentence and remain faithful to that sentence. Let it carry the whole atmosphere of fulfillment. Let it be enough. A single whispered command, spoken from remembered feeling, is often more powerful than an hour of strained effort. Why? Because power lies in state, not in length. The law responds to what you are, not to how long you talk about it. So if you feel yourself slipping into mental labor, stop, breathe, return, whisper, feel, rest. This is persistence in its cleanest form. And in the night, as you drift towards sleep, there is a special grace available. The world grows quieter, the body loosens. The old thoughts lose some of their sharpness. In that blessed softness, whisper the command again, like one settling into his rightful home. Not may it be, but it is. Not I hope, but I know. Let the whisper be the last movement of consciousness before sleep receives you. Then sleep not as one waiting for mercy, but as one who has remained loyal to the unseen, and therefore has already touched the hem of fulfillment. For persistence is not merely continuing. It is continuing from the end. It is remaining faithful to your own deepest act. It is love made steady. It is faith made quiet. It is the hidden strength by which the invisible becomes inevitable. And if you will practice it, gently and consistently, you will discover that what once felt like effort becomes nature, and what once felt unseen becomes undeniable. There comes a moment in this journey that feels almost too subtle for the rational mind to respect, and yet it is one of the clearest signs that you have truly moved inwardly. It is the moment when joy begins to appear before anything in the outer world has changed. I do not mean forced cheerfulness. I do not mean pretending to be happy while secretly afraid. I speak of a quiet, uncaused gladness that rises for no visible reason, a lightness in the body, a softening in the breath, a gentle smile that comes uninvited as you go about your day. Nothing in the ledger has shifted. No letter has yet arrived. No call has yet been made. And still, something within you feels as though the burden has already lifted. That feeling is not imagination in the sense of fantasy. It is imagination in its truest sense, the acceptance of the fulfilled state as present fact. And the joy that follows is not the result of manifestation. It is its herald. Most people live under the assumption that joy will come after the problem is solved. They say, when the debt is paid, I will relax. Or, when the money arrives, I will feel grateful. But in truth, the law works in the opposite direction. Joy is not the reward of fulfillment. Joy is the condition that allows fulfillment to appear. When you can feel relief before the payment, peace before the solution, gratitude before the income, you are no longer waiting. You are already participating in the end. And because feeling is the secret, the outer world must in time rearrange itself to reflect the emotional state you have accepted as real. I discovered this not through theory, but through an almost humorous contrast in my own life. There were times when I spoke the right words, imagined the right scenes, and yet felt heavy, tense, expectant in the worst sense, waiting, watching, checking. In those periods, nothing seemed to move. The imaginal act had been performed, but I had not yet allowed myself the joy of completion. I was still standing at the door, asking if anyone had heard me. Then, in another season, something shifted within me. I spoke the word once, felt it as best I could, and then, almost without trying, I began to feel lighter. Not because anything had changed in the outer world, but because I had accepted inwardly that the change was already real. I found myself laughing softly at worries that would once have tightened my chest. I noticed a kind of inward brightness that had nothing to do with circumstance. That joy was not based on evidence. It was based on acceptance. And within days, sometimes hours, the outer began to move. Not because I had chased it, but because I had stopped withholding the emotional tone of fulfillment until after the fact. I had allowed myself to feel now what I once thought must wait for later. Joy precedes manifestation, because joy is the emotional signature of possession. When a child knows the gift has already been bought, he begins to feel glad even before he sees it. He may not yet have opened the package, but the certainty of its presence has already altered his mood. He moves differently. He speaks differently. He expects differently. So it is with you. When you truly accept the imaginal act, you begin to feel something very like relief. Not excitement that demands proof, but relief that rests in knowing. It is the sensation of having put something down. The invisible burden of how will this happen begins to dissolve, and in its place comes a calm contentment that needs no outer permission. That contentment is creative. Gratitude, when it arises in this way, becomes confirmation not of what you see, but of what you have inwardly accepted as real. It confirms that you are no longer pleading from lack, but receiving from fullness. You are no longer asking the world to change so that you may feel good. You are allowing yourself to feel good so that the world may change. Gratitude before evidence is one of the most powerful positions you can occupy because it implies receipt. You do not give thanks for something you do not believe you have. Even if the thing is still invisible, your thanksgiving tells the subconscious, I accept this as mine. And the subconscious, which responds not to logic but to feeling, begins to organize the bridge of incidents accordingly. If you listen closely to your own heart, when gratitude arises before the result, you will notice that it feels quiet. There is no urgency in it. It does not say, hurry and prove this to me. It simply rests in appreciation. It may even seem unreasonable to the outer mind. You may say to yourself, why do I feel thankful when nothing has yet appeared? But that very question reveals the shift. You are no longer waiting for the senses to authorize your emotion. You are allowing imagination to do so. And when imagination authorizes your gratitude, the senses must eventually follow. This is why I say to you, do not postpone your joy. Do not hold your gratitude hostage until the world has rearranged itself to your liking. The rearrangement depends upon your emotional acceptance. When you feel thankful in advance, you are not lying to yourself. You are recognizing that in imagination, the only reality from which the outer springs, the thing is already done. There is a serenity in this that the world often mistakes for carelessness. Others may wonder why you seem calm when they know your situation has not yet visibly changed. They may interpret your quiet joy as denial. But you know better. You are not denying the present. You are living from the future that has already been accepted in consciousness. And because you live from it, the future begins to press upon the present, reshaping it in ways that seem natural once they occur. You may find yourself giving thanks for small things more readily. The warmth of the morning light, the simple fact of being alive, a kind word from a stranger. These are not distractions from your desire. They are rehearsals of the feeling of possession. Gratitude for what is easily seen prepares the heart to remain grateful for what is not yet seen. Then, when the larger fulfillment appears, it does not shock you. It confirms you. I have seen many who could visualize vividly and speak beautifully, yet remained emotionally cautious. They would say, I will be grateful when I know for certain. But the law does not respond to that caution. It responds to emotional acceptance. When you can say inwardly, thank you, before the evidence arrives, you have already entered the state of the wish fulfilled. That simple phrase, spoken not as ritual, but as recognition, often changes everything. And if tonight, as you listen with eyes closed and the world fading, you feel even a small stirring of appreciation for what has not yet appeared, do not dismiss it. Let it grow. Let it spread through the body as though the fulfillment were already resting in your hands. For in a deeper sense, it is the imaginal act is complete. The joy is its fragrance. Hold to that fragrance gently. Do not force it. Allow it to accompany you into sleep. Gratitude is the soft confirmation that what you accepted in the unseen has already begun its journey toward visibility. And joy, appearing before the result, is the first quiet announcement that imagination has been believed. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, do not strain. Simply remember who you are. Let the 7 words live in you as a quiet certainty, not as effort. Whisper them inwardly once, and then let gratitude take over. Feel the relief as though it is already done. Because in imagination it is. Do not check, do not argue with shadows. Rest, and if you wake in the night, return gently to the same simple feeling: it is finished. All is well. I am provided for. Now surrender to sleep in the state of fulfillment, and let the outer world rearrange itself in perfect order to match what you have accepted within.